My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the custom wrench, Chen's wrench, the one I swore I'd never use again. 96 hours the constellation had been dead. 3 teams had failed. Now it was just me, a microscopic defect buried deep in the engine, and 12 hours before 5,000 sailors abandoned ship. The young lieutenant blocking my path didn't know I was the engineer who'd tried to stop this disaster 15 years ago. He didn't know they'd destroyed my career to hide the truth. And he definitely didn't know that the valve killing his ship was the same one that got my best friend murdered. "Ma'am, you need to leave," he said. I looked him dead in the eye. "Son, I'm here to save your life. Subscribe and stay with us. This 55-year-old retired captain is about to take on the entire Navy. Comment your city and let's see how far courage travels." Here's her story. Elena sat on the edge of her bed, phone still pressed against her ear, her hand trembling so badly she almost dropped it. "You have no right to call me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You have no right to speak that name." "I know." Thorne's voice was rough, exhausted. "But 96 hours ago, the Constellation's primary propulsion system died. 3 engineering teams have failed. We're dead in the water during critical war games, and Pacific Fleet Command is breathing down my neck every hour. Elena, you're the only person who might understand why. Call someone else. There is no one else." A pause. The symptoms matched the Lincoln. Elena's breath caught in her throat. The Lincoln. 2010. The incident that had ended everything. "That's impossible," she said. "They told me it was fixed. They classified the whole damn thing. They lied to you." Thorne's voice dropped lower. "Elena, I think someone buried your warnings. And now it's happening again." She stood up, pacing her small bedroom, her mind racing through scenarios she'd spent 8 years trying to forget. "If you're right, if this is what I think it is, then you're not dealing with a mechanical failure. You're dealing with a cover-up that goes all the way to the top. I know. They'll destroy me again, Marcus. You know they will. Not this time." His voice hardened with conviction. "This time I'm a 4-star Admiral with the CNO's private number. This time you're not alone." Elena walked to her window, staring out at the dark Pacific. Somewhere out there, a carrier full of young sailors was sitting helpless. And she knew, God help her, she knew exactly what was killing it. "When do you need me?" "There's a helicopter waiting at North Island. It'll have you on deck in 90 minutes. "Marcus, I need to know. Is Morrison still in the Pacific Fleet?" The silence on the other end told her everything. "Vice Admiral Morrison is Deputy Commander Pacific Fleet," Thorne finally said. "He'll be at the briefing." Elena closed her eyes. The man who'd destroyed her career, the man who'd threatened her into silence, the man who might have killed Chen to keep the secret buried. "Then this just got a lot more complicated," she said. "I know. But Elena, I've been carrying Chen's death on my conscience for 8 years. If there's even a chance his murder was connected to Nightingale, I need to know. We need to know." The word murder hung in the air like smoke. "You investigated, quietly, for years. His training accident had too many inconsistencies. But I had no proof, nothing concrete. Just suspicions and a dead man who'd been your chief." Elena felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest. Chen hadn't died in an accident. She'd always suspected, always wondered, but hearing it confirmed was different. "I'll be there in 2 hours," she said. "But Marcus, if this is Nightingale, if Morrison covered it up and people died because of it, I'm not staying quiet this time. I don't care who I have to go through." "Good," Thorne said, "because neither am I." The helicopter ride to the Constellation was a nightmare of memories. Elena sat alone in the back, the rhythmic thump of the rotors matching her racing heartbeat. She'd brought one bag, her old engineering toolkit, the one she'd carried for 22 years of active service. Inside was Chen's last gift to her, a custom-made torque wrench with their ship's hull number engraved on the handle. She'd never used it after he died. Couldn't bear to. The crew chief leaned back and shouted over the engine noise. 5 minutes out, ma'am. Admiral's waiting on the flight deck personally." Elena nodded, checking her watch. 0547. Sunrise was still an hour away. They were bringing her in under darkness, keeping her arrival quiet. That told her everything about how desperate they were. When the helicopter touched down, She saw Thorne immediately, a tall, lean figure in khakis standing at the edge of the deck, his face carved with worry and determination. Behind him stood another officer, younger, his posture rigid with barely concealed hostility. Elena grabbed her bag and jumped down, ducking under the rotors. Thorne met her halfway, and for a moment neither spoke. Then he extended his hand. "Thank you for coming." "Don't thank me yet," Elena said, shaking it firmly. "You might regret this call." Thorne gestured to the younger officer. "This is Commander Jackson Burke, the Constellation's chief engineer. He'll be your liaison." Burke stepped forward, his jaw tight. He was maybe 40, with sharp eyes and the kind of perfect uniform that spoke to someone who lived by regulations. He didn't offer his hand. "Captain Vasquez," he said, the title sounding more like an accusation than a courtesy. "I want to be clear from the start, I didn't request civilian assistance, and I don't appreciate the implication that my department can't handle our own equipment." "Noted," Elena said flatly. "Now take me to your engine room, Commander, and show me what you've done for the last 96 hours. Admiral Thorne asked that we brief you first." "I don't need a briefing. I need to see the failure." Burke's face flushed. "With all due respect, ma'am, we follow protocol on this ship. The captain and department heads are waiting in the wardroom." "Commander," Elena's voice cut like steel, "right now, somewhere in your engineering spaces, there's a component failing in a way that shouldn't be possible. Every hour it stays broken, this ship becomes a bigger strategic liability. I didn't fly out here at 0:30 to sit in a wardroom drinking coffee and looking at PowerPoint slides. Take me to the engine room, or I'm getting back on that helicopter." Thorne intervened smoothly. "Commander Burke, escort Captain Vasquez to main engineering. I'll brief the captain and let him know she's aboard." Burke looked like he wanted to argue, but Thorne's tone left no room for negotiation. "Aye, sir. This way, ma'am." They descended into the bowels of the carrier, the familiar maze of passageways and ladder wells. The deeper they went, the more Elena felt the weight of memory pressing down on her. How many times had she made this same journey, on the Lincoln, on the Enterprise, on the Reagan? The smell of the ship oil metal cleaning solution and something uniquely maritime was unchanged. It brought everything back. Burke led her in silence, his back stiff with resentment. Finally, as they approached main engineering, he stopped and turned. "I don't know what happened between you and the Navy, Captain Vasquez. I don't know why you left or what your relationship is with the Admiral. But I've served on this ship for 3 years. These are my sailors, my systems, my responsibility. We've done everything by the book, followed every procedure, brought in every expert the Navy has. If we've failed, it's not because we didn't try." Elena studied him. There was pride there, yes, but also genuine exhaustion and fear. This was a man who'd been beaten down by an impossible problem whose confidence was shattered. "I'm not here to embarrass you, Commander," she said quietly. "I'm here because I might have seen this before. And if I have, then your book, all your procedures and experts won't help, because the book was written to hide what's really wrong." Burke's eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means take me to your engine room and let's find out if I'm right." The main machinery space was controlled chaos. Sailors in coveralls moved between equipment, their faces drawn with exhaustion. Diagnostic equipment was everywhere, laptops, testing rigs, portable analyzers. In the center of it all sat the massive turbine assembly, silent and cold. Elena set down her bag and just stood there, taking it in. Burke watched her, clearly impatient. "The primary steam system is fully functional," he began, launching into what was clearly a practiced briefing. "We've tested every valve, every pressure regulator, every temperature sensor. The reactor is operating normally. Condensers are clean. Feed pumps are nominal. But when we try to spin up the turbines for propulsion, we get a cascade shutdown at 72% power. The computer aborts the sequence, citing an unspecified integration fault. We've replaced the computer system twice. Same result." "Show me the diagnostic logs," Elena said. Burke pulled up a laptop, scrolling through screens of data. Elena leaned in, her eyes scanning the numbers with practiced speed. Temperatures, pressures, flow rates, timing sequences. Everything looked normal. "Except there," she said, pointing at a cluster of readings. "Your steam pressure differential. It's fluctuating by 0.03% every 11 seconds. Burke frowned. "That's well within tolerance. The system's designed to handle variations up to 2%. I know, but it shouldn't be fluctuating at all, not in a regular pattern. That's not random variance. That's resonance. Resonance from what? Elena straightened up her mind, racing through possibilities. Do you have the maintenance logs for the last major overhaul? Of course. Burke pulled up another file. 18 months ago, full turbine inspection and system certification. Everything passed. What about modifications? Any special projects? Any classified retrofits in the last 5 years? Burke's expression became guarded. I'm not at liberty to discuss classified work. Commander, I have a TS-SCI clearance that's still active. I was read into special projects at the O5 level. If there were modifications to the propulsion integration system, I need to know. Burke studied her for a long moment, then made a decision. He pulled her aside, away from the other sailors. 3 years ago, we underwent a specialized retrofit, Project Nightingale. It involved changes to the reactor cooling interface and the steam generation system, supposed to improve efficiency by 14%. It was successful. We've been running it ever since without problems. Elena felt her stomach drop. Show me the modification schematics. They're classified top secret. I can't just... Commander Burke. Elena's voice was deadly quiet. I was the primary engineer who designed the diagnostic protocols for Project Nightingale. I was the one who identified the critical flaw in the system, and I was the one who was forced into retirement when I refused to sign off on it being safe. Burke stared at her, his face going pale. You're that Vasquez, the Lincoln incident, that was you. That was me, and if this ship has Nightingale installed, then you don't have an unspecified integration fault. You have a microscopic stress fracture in a custom pressure regulator valve that only exists because of those modifications. A valve that's not on any maintenance schedule because the documentation was classified and then conveniently lost. A valve that failed on the Lincoln, caused a near-catastrophic cooling failure, and got buried under layers of classification and lies. That's impossible, Burke said, but his voice lacked conviction. If there was a flaw that serious, they wouldn't have installed it fleet-wide. Wouldn't they? Elena pulled out her phone, scrolling through photos until she found what she was looking for, an old schematic she'd photographed before they'd forced her to hand over all her documentation. This is the valve assembly. Custom manufactured, one of a kind, buried deep in the system where you'd never find it unless you knew exactly where to look. On the Lincoln, it took me 3 days of diagnostic work before I even suspected it existed. By the time I confirmed it, the damage was done. Burke took the phone, studying the image. His hands were shaking slightly. Where is this located? If the Constellation's layout matches the Lincoln, it's behind the number 2 heat exchanger, accessible only through a maintenance tunnel that requires shutting down half the cooling system to reach. Tell me, Commander, did any of your engineering teams suggest looking there? No, Burke admitted. We didn't even know that assembly existed, because it's not in your documentation. It was part of the classified retrofit, and when Nightingale was shut down after the Lincoln incident, they scrubbed it from the official records. But they didn't remove it from the ships. They just made it invisible. Elena watched understanding dawn on Burke's face, followed immediately by horror. How many ships have this? He asked. At the time, I was forced out 12 carriers and 8 cruisers, probably more now. And they're all at risk. They're all at risk of the same failure. But here's what you need to understand. Commander, this wasn't an oversight. This was a choice. I submitted a 40-page engineering report detailing the flaw. I personally briefed Vice Admiral Morrison. I recommended immediate removal and system rollback. And I was told to stand down, classify my findings, and never speak of it again. When I refused, they gave me a choice: take early retirement with my pension intact or face court-martial for unauthorized modifications and mishandling of classified material. Burke's face had gone from pale to red. That's unconscionable. That's criminal. Yes, Elena said simply. It is. A voice from behind them made them both turn. It's also a conversation that should be happening in a more secure location. Admiral Thorne stood at the entrance to the machinery space, his expression unreadable. Next to him was a man Elena recognized immediately, even after 15 years. Vice Admiral William Morrison, silver-haired and immaculate in his service dress uniform, his face set in lines of practiced authority. Elena felt her entire body go cold. "Captain Vasquez," Morrison said, his voice smooth and controlled. "I heard you'd come out of retirement. How unexpected." "Admiral Morrison," Elena kept her voice level through sheer force of will. "Still cleaning up messes for the Navy, I see." Morrison's eyes narrowed fractionally. "I'm here to ensure the situation is resolved quickly and quietly. Admiral Thorne informs me you have a theory about our propulsion failure." "It's not a theory. It's the same defect I reported to you in 2010. The same defect you classified and buried. The same defect that's now killed this ship's propulsion system, just like it did the Lincoln's." The machinery space had gone utterly silent. Every sailor within earshot had stopped working, sensing the confrontation. Morrison stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. "Captain Vasquez, you signed a non-disclosure agreement. The details of Project Nightingale remain classified. If you persist in discussing classified material in an unsecured space, I'll have no choice but to have you removed from this vessel and potentially charged with breaching national security protocols." "Then charge me," Elena shot back. "Because I'm not watching another crew die because you're more concerned with covering your ass than fixing the problem." "Captain," Thorne's voice cracked like a whip. "Admiral Morrison, both of you wardroom now. Commander Burke, secure this space. No one discusses what they've heard here. That's an order." The tension held for another heartbeat. Then Morrison turned and strode out. Thorne gestured sharply for Elena to follow. She grabbed her toolkit and complied, but not before seeing the look on Burke's face. It wasn't hostility anymore. It was the expression of a man whose entire world had just been revealed as built on lies. The wardroom meeting was brutal. Captain James Reeves, the Constellation's commanding officer, sat at the head of the table, his face grave. Thorne sat to his right, Elena to his left. Morrison stood at the far end, projecting authority even in his posture. "Let me make sure I understand," Reeves said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "You're telling me that my ship, a multi-billion-dollar nuclear aircraft carrier, has been operating for 3 years with a known defect that was deliberately hidden from my engineering department." "That's exactly what I'm telling you," Elena said. Morrison cut in smoothly. "With respect, Captain Reeves, what you're hearing is speculation based on a 15-year-old incident that was thoroughly investigated and resolved. Captain Vasquez was involved in that investigation and was found to have made unauthorized modifications to ship systems. Her concerns were reviewed by a board of senior engineers and determined to be unfounded. The Lincoln's issue was resolved through standard maintenance procedures." Elena laughed a harsh, bitter sound. "Unfounded, I documented everything. Temperature variations, pressure inconsistencies, metallurgical analysis of the valve components. I proved the design was flawed." "You proved that your modifications had created instabilities," Morrison countered. "The board's findings were clear." "The board was handpicked by you and they never saw my full report because you classified it before they could review it." Reeves held up a hand. "Enough. Admiral Thorne, you brought Captain Vasquez here. What's your assessment?" Thorne leaned forward. "Captain, I served with Elena Vasquez for 6 years. I watched her troubleshoot problems that had teams of engineers stumped. I've never known her to be wrong about a technical issue, and I've never known her to lie. If she says this is Project Nightingale coming back to haunt us, I believe her. With all due respect to Captain Vasquez's past service," Morrison said, his tone making it clear he had no respect at all. "We can't make critical decisions based on decade-old grudges. We need current data, proper analysis." "I can give you current data," Elena interrupted. "Let me access the valve assembly. Give me 6 hours with your diagnostic equipment. If I'm wrong, I'll leave this ship and you'll never hear from me again. But if I'm right, Captain Reeves, you need to know what you're dealing with." Reeves looked at Morrison. "Admiral, do you have any objection to allowing Captain Vasquez access to the engineering spaces under supervised conditions?" Morrison's jaw worked. He was trapped and he knew it. If he refused, he looked like he was hiding something. If he agreed, Elena might expose everything. "No objection," he said finally. "But I'll be assigning observers. And Captain Vasquez, if you so much as touch a classified system without proper authorization, I'll have you in custody before you can blink." "Understood," Elena said coldly. Reeves nodded. "Commander Burke will supervise. Captain Vasquez, you have until 1400 hours. That's 8 hours. Find me proof." As the meeting broke up, Thorne caught Elena's arm. "Be careful," he said quietly. "Morrison's desperate. A desperate man is dangerous." "I know," Elena replied, "but so am I." Back in main engineering, Burke had assembled a small team, 3 of his best petty officers, all with top-secret clearances. Elena briefed them quickly and efficiently. "We're going after a component that's not on any standard schematic. It's going to require a partial coolant system shutdown and working in a confined space with limited visibility. This is going to be uncomfortable, possibly dangerous, and definitely against at least 6 standard procedures. Anyone want out?" The 3 sailors looked at each other, then at Burke. The youngest, a second-class petty officer named Rodriguez, spoke up. "Ma'am, we've been beating our heads against this problem for 4 days. If you know what's wrong, we want to fix it." Elena felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. "Okay, let's get to work." The next 7 hours were a brutal test of skill, patience, and physical endurance. The access tunnel to the valve assembly was barely 2 feet in diameter, a claustrophobic tube of metal and insulation. Elena, being the smallest and most experienced, went in first, pulling diagnostic equipment behind her on a makeshift sled. Burke fed her tools and monitored her vital signs from outside. "Captain, your heart rate is elevated. You need to take a break." "I'm fine," Elena grunted, wrestling with a stubborn access panel. "Just hot as hell in here." "Temperature in the tunnel is 118 degrees, Burke reported. "OSHA would have my head." "OSHA's not trying to save a carrier." Elena finally got the panel free. Behind it was a maze of pipes, wires, and components packed so tightly it looked impossible to service. "Okay, I see it. The regulator valve, 3rd pipe from the left, about 6 inches back from the access point. Can you reach it? Give me the micro camera. I need to see the valve housing." Rodriguez passed in the camera, a flexible fiber optic unit designed for tight inspections. Elena threaded it carefully into the space, her hands steady, despite the heat and her cramping muscles. The image appeared on Burke's monitor outside. He leaned close, studying it. "I don't see any obvious damage," he said. "You won't. Not on visual inspection. Rodriguez passed me the ultrasonic probe." The young sailor complied. Elena positioned the probe against the valve housing, and the equipment registered the material thickness and density. "There," she breathed. "Right there. The housing wall is 0.04 millimeters thinner than spec. It's been eroding from the inside, caused by the exact pressure resonance I predicted 15 years ago." Burke's voice was tight. "How long until complete failure?" "On the Lincoln, we had about 30 days from first detection to catastrophic breach. But you've been running this ship hard for weeks." "My guess. You have maybe 72 hours before this valve fails completely, and when it does, you'll get a steam leak into the reactor cooling system that'll trigger an emergency scram. This ship will be dead for months." "Jesus," Burke whispered. "Get me out of here," Elena said. "We need to brief the captain immediately." But when they emerged from the engineering space 20 minutes later, they found Admiral Morrison waiting, flanked by 2 Master-at-Arms Navy military police. "Captain Vasquez," Morrison said formally, "I'm placing you under restriction to quarters pending an investigation into your handling of classified material. These petty officers will escort you to your assigned berthing." Burke stepped forward. "Admiral Captain Vasquez just confirmed the defect. We have critical findings that need to be reported to the captain immediately." "Commander Burke, you are to submit any findings through proper channels. Captain Vasquez is no longer authorized to participate in this investigation." Elena felt rage boiling up inside her, but she forced it down. "Of course, Admiral. Proper channels. Just like 15 years ago." Morrison's face was stone. "Take her." As the Master-at-Arms moved to either side of her, Elena looked directly at Burke. "Commander, in my toolkit, there's a red notebook. It belonged to Chief Petty Officer Chen. Make sure Admiral Thorne sees it. He'll understand." Morrison's face went white. "Remove her. Now." They led Elena away. but not before she saw Burke's expression shift from confusion to grim determination. He'd find the notebook. He'd understand. And maybe, just maybe, this time the truth would come out. In her assigned quarters, a tiny stateroom with a locked door and a guard outside, Elena sat on the narrow bed and waited. She didn't have to wait long. Within an hour, her door opened. Admiral Thorne entered, his face dark with fury. He dismissed the guard and closed the door. "I just read Chen's notebook," he said without preamble. "Elena, why didn't you tell me you had this? Because until you said murder on the phone, I thought I was just being paranoid. Chen gave it to me 3 days before he died. Told me to keep it safe, said it was insurance. I didn't understand what he meant until after the accident. Then I was too scared to come forward." Thorne sat heavily in the room's only chair. He documented everything. The meetings with Morrison, the pressure from defense contractors, the threats. "Elena, this proves the cover-up. This proves Morrison knew about the flaw and buried it deliberately." "I know." "The last entry," Thorne's voice broke slightly. "He wrote that if anything happened to him, to trust you, that you were right and they were going to get people killed." Elena felt tears burning behind her eyes but refused to let them fall. "He died because he wouldn't stay quiet, Marcus. He died because he believed the truth mattered more than his career. And now Morrison's trying to do the same thing to this ship that he did to the Lincoln." Thorne stood abruptly. "Not this time. I'm taking this to the CNO. Morrison's finished. He'll fight. He has allies, people who will protect him. Let him try." Thorne's voice was steel. "I've been a coward for 8 years, Elena. I suspected Morrison was dirty, suspected Chen's death wasn't an accident, and I did nothing. I let you take the fall because it was easier than fighting the system. Not anymore." He moved to the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I should have stood with you back then." "You're standing with me now," Elena said quietly. "That counts for something." After Thorne left, Elena lay back on the bed, exhausted, but she couldn't rest. Her mind was racing, playing through scenarios, contingencies. Morrison wouldn't go quietly. He'd fight, and he'd use every dirty trick he had. She was right. 2 hours later, her door opened again, but this time it wasn't Thorne. It was Commander Burke, and his face was grim. "Captain Vasquez, we have a problem. The valve is failing faster than you predicted. We just detected a micro leak in the cooling system. Engineering estimates we have 12 hours, maybe less, before catastrophic failure." Elena sat up. "Where's Admiral Thorne?" "In a secure communication with the CNO. But Admiral Morrison has proposed an emergency solution, a temporary patch that'll get us limping to Pearl Harbor. He says it's our only option given the timeline. And Captain Reeves is considering it. Ma'am Morrison's pitch is convincing. He's making it sound like your warnings are overly conservative, that we have more time than you think." Elena stood, moving to the door. The guard outside straightened. "Commander, that patch will fail. Morrison knows it'll fail. He's buying time, hoping he can get the ship to port before anyone realizes the temporary fix is inadequate. But it won't hold, and when it fails at sea, people are going to die." Burke's jaw set. "Then we need to stop him. I'm under restriction. I can't. I'm the chief engineer of this ship." Burke interrupted, his voice hardening with new authority. "And I'm formally requesting your consultation as a subject matter expert. Guard, open this door." The Master-at-Arms looked uncomfortable. "Sir, I have orders from Admiral Morrison, and I have operational authority in an engineering emergency, which this qualifies as. Open the door, petty officer, or I'll have you relieved and spend the rest of your career explaining why you obstructed critical damage control operations." The guard hesitated, then complied. Elena stepped out. "Commander, you just put your career on the line for me," she said. Burke met her eyes. "You put your career on the line for the truth 15 years ago. About time someone returned the favor." Together, they headed for the wardroom where the emergency meeting was taking place. Elena knew they were about to walk into a firestorm, but as they moved through the ship's passageways, she felt something she hadn't felt in 8 years. She felt like a naval officer again. The truth was coming out one way or another, and this time she wasn't backing down. The wardroom was packed when Elena and Burke arrived. Captain Reeves sat at the head of the table, his face showing the strain of 4 sleepless days. Admiral Morrison stood at a whiteboard covered in diagrams, mid-presentation, his voice smooth and confident. Admiral Thorne sat in the corner, his expression dark as thunder. Morrison stopped talking the moment Elena entered. "Captain Vasquez," he said, his tone dripping with false concern. "I wasn't aware you'd been released from restriction." "She hasn't been," Burke said before Elena could respond. "I requisitioned her as a technical consultant under emergency engineering protocols. This is my department, Admiral, and I determine who I need to solve critical problems." Morrison's face hardened. "Commander, you're overstepping your authority." "No, Admiral, you are." Burke's voice was steady, but his hands were clenched at his sides. "I just spent 7 hours watching Captain Vasquez identify a defect that 3 separate engineering teams missed. A defect that matches her predictions from 15 years ago, word for word. A defect that's currently killing this ship. So with all due respect, sir, she's staying." The room went silent. Reeves looked between Morrison and Burke, then at Elena. "Captain Vasquez, you have something to add to this discussion." "Yes, sir. Admiral Morrison just proposed a temporary patch to get you to Pearl Harbor. Don't do it. That patch will fail within 48 hours. And when it does, you'll get a catastrophic steam leak that'll scram your reactor and possibly injure or kill sailors in the engineering spaces." Morrison's jaw tightened. "That's speculation based on outdated analysis. The temporary repair I've proposed uses modern materials and techniques that didn't exist 15 years ago. It uses the exact same approach that failed on the Lincoln," Elena cut in. "I know because I watched it fail. I was there when the patch blew out, and we had to evacuate main engineering. We were lucky no one died, but 2 sailors spent weeks in the hospital with steam burns. Captain Reeves, I have documentation that proves Admiral Morrison knew the original design was flawed and approved it anyway." "That's a lie," Morrison said, but his voice lacked conviction. Thorne stood up, pulling a worn red notebook from his jacket. "This belonged to Chief Petty Officer Chen Captain Vasquez's senior enlisted advisor on the Lincoln. He documented everything: meetings, directives, threats. Admiral Morrison, he recorded your exact words when you ordered Elena to classify her findings and stop investigating. Quote, 'This project represents $800 million in contractor commitments and 14 months of fleet-wide modifications. Your concerns are noted but not substantiated. You will cease this investigation immediately, or I will have you relieved for cause.'" Morrison's face went pale. "That notebook is hearsay. It proves nothing." "It proves motive," Thorne said coldly, "and it corroborates every claim Captain Vasquez has made. Captain Reeves, I've already transmitted this documentation to the CNO. Admiral Morrison is being recalled to Washington for an investigation." "You had no authority to do that," Morrison snarled. "I had every authority. I'm a fleet commander, and you're compromising operational security to protect your own career. You're done, Bill." Morrison stood frozen for a moment, his carefully constructed world collapsing around him. Then his expression shifted, hardening into something desperate and dangerous. "Captain Reeves, listen to me carefully. This ship needs to move, right now. The situation in the South China Sea is deteriorating by the hour. If the Constellation stays dead in the water, we lose our strategic position. My repair will hold long enough to get you operational. Vasquez's solution, whatever it is, will take days we don't have. My solution will take 48 hours and save your ship permanently," Elena said. "Your patch will buy you maybe 2 days before you're facing the same crisis, only this time you'll be further from help." Reeves rubbed his face, the weight of command visible in every line. "How certain are you, Captain Vasquez? Not 90%, not probably. Can you guarantee your repair will work?" Elena met his eyes. "Sir, I can't guarantee anything in engineering, but I can tell you that I've made this exact repair before under worse conditions with less equipment. On the Lincoln, after Morrison's patch failed, I spent 3 days fabricating a custom solution from spare parts. That repair held for 6 years until the ship was decommissioned. I know this system better than anyone alive because I designed half the diagnostic protocols. If you give me time and trust, I'll fix your ship. And if you're wrong, then I'll take full responsibility. Court-martial me, revoke my clearances, prosecute me for whatever charges you want. But sir, I'm not wrong. Reeves looked at Morrison. Admiral, what happens if Captain Vasquez is right and your patch fails? Morrison's silence was answer enough. Commander Burke, Reeves said, what's your assessment? Burke straightened. Sir, I trust Captain Vasquez. Everything she's predicted has been accurate. Everything she's identified has been confirmed. She's earned my confidence. Reeves nodded slowly. Captain Vasquez, you have 48 hours. Get my ship moving. Admiral Morrison, you're confined to your quarters pending orders from Pacific Fleet. Dismissed. Morrison opened his mouth to protest, then thought better of it. He left without another word, but the look he shot Elena was pure hatred. Thorne followed him out, clearly ensuring the Admiral actually went to his quarters. When they were gone, Reeves gestured for Elena and Burke to stay. Captain Vasquez, I need you to understand something. The strategic situation Morrison mentioned isn't exaggeration. 3 days ago, Chinese forces established a no-fly zone around the Spratly Islands. We're supposed to be leading a freedom of navigation exercise right now, showing the flag. Instead, we're drifting. Every hour we stay broken, Beijing gets bolder. I need this ship operational not just for engineering reasons, but for national security reasons. I understand, sir. Do you? Because if you fail, if this repair doesn't work, you won't be the only one paying the price. Every sailor on this ship, every ally counting on American naval power, they all pay. That's a hell of a weight to carry. Elena thought of Chen, of the young sailors on the Lincoln who'd trusted her, of every person she'd served with who'd believed that truth and competence mattered. I've been carrying that weight for 15 years, Captain. At least now I get to do something about it. Reeves studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Get to work. The next 30 hours were a controlled frenzy. Elena commandeered a corner of the machine shop and turned it into her personal laboratory. She pulled Burke's best machinist, a brilliant young ensign named Kim, who'd studied materials engineering at MIT, and 2 crusty old chief petty officers who'd forgotten more about jury rigging than most engineers would ever learn. Listen up, Elena said, spreading out hand-drawn schematics on a work table. We can't just replace the failed valve because there are no spare parts. It was a custom component that technically doesn't exist in any supply system. So we're going to make one. From scratch. Using components from 3 different systems. Chief Torres, a barrel-chested man with tattooed forearms, let out a low whistle. Ma'am, that's not exactly by the book. The book is what got us here, Chief. We're writing a new chapter. Over the next hours, they worked with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Elena machined components with tolerances measured in microns. Kim ran stress calculations and material compatibility analyses. Torres and his partner, Chief Williams, scavenged parts from backup systems throughout the ship. Burke appeared every 2 hours with updates. We just detected another microleak. Pressure's dropping 0.02% per hour. I know. We're on schedule. Elena, if this doesn't work, it'll work. But privately, in the dead hours of the night when she was alone with her tools, doubt crept in. Her hands weren't as steady as they'd been 15 years ago. Her eyes strained under the magnification lenses. What if she'd lost her edge? What if retirement had dulled the skills that had once made her indispensable? She was carefully threading a custom-tapped bolt when a voice behind her said, "You always did make that face when you were worried." Elena turned to find Admiral Thorne standing in the doorway, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. "Haven't slept more than 3 hours a night since Morrison showed up on this ship." He handed her a cup and pulled up a stool. CNO called. "Morrison's investigation is official. They're looking into Chen's death, the Lincoln incident, all of it. Will it stick? Depends on what we find. Right now it's Chen's notebook against Morrison's word. We need more." Elena took a sip of coffee, grimacing at the bitter navy brew. "Chen told me once that Morrison had help, that there were contractors involved, people with money who needed Nightingale to succeed. He said the project was worth billions in future contracts. He mentioned any names. 1, Patterson Defense Systems. They manufactured the original valve assemblies." Thorne's expression darkened. "Patterson has contracts with half the Pacific Fleet. If they knowingly supplied defective components, this goes way beyond Morrison." Chen thought so. He was trying to build a case, gather evidence. That's why he kept the notebook. He told me he'd made copies, hidden them in different places. Said if anything happened to him, the truth would come out. But it didn't. No, Elena said quietly, because I was too scared to look for them. After Chen died, after they forced me out, I just wanted to disappear. I took my pension and ran. Elena, you were facing a rigged system. You did what you had to do to survive. Chen didn't run. He stayed and fought, and they killed him for it. Thorne set down his coffee cup. I've been thinking about that. Chen's death was ruled an accident during a damage control drill. A training weight broke loose and struck him. But the investigation was cursory closed within 48 hours. For a chief petty officer's death, that's unusual. Morrison had it buried. Probably. But the thing is, there were witnesses. 3 junior sailors were present during that drill. I pulled their service records. One separated from the Navy 2 months after Chen's death. One requested immediate transfer to a different command. The third is still serving now, a first-class petty officer assigned to shore duty in Norfolk. Elena's pulse quickened. They saw something. Maybe. I've got people reaching out quietly. If we can get one of them to talk, Morrison will know. He's probably had them monitored for years. Then we move fast. Thorne checked his watch. It's 0340. How long until your repair is ready? If everything goes perfectly, 16 hours. If we hit complications, could be 24. And if Morrison tries something, Elena picked up Chen's custom torque wrench, running her thumb over the engraved hull number. Then we deal with it. After Thorne left, Elena returned to her work with renewed focus. The custom valve assembly was taking shape, a beautiful piece of engineering that existed nowhere in any manual. It was part art, part science, and completely unauthorized. If it failed, her career was over. If it worked, she'd have proven that sometimes the best solutions came from ignoring the rules. Around 0600, Ensign Kim appeared with breakfast from the wardroom, powdered eggs and toast that tasted like cardboard, but Elena ate it gratefully. "Ma'am, I've been running the thermal expansion calculations," Kim said, pulling up a tablet. "At operating temperature, your valve is going to expand by 0.07 millimeters. That's within tolerance, but barely." "Show me." They spent 20 minutes reviewing the math. Elena's tired brain working through the equations. Kim was right, the margin was tight. Too tight. "We need to compensate," Elena said. "Adjust the mounting bracket by 0.1 millimeters. That'll give us breathing room." "That means remachining the bracket. That's another 4 hours minimum." "Then we better get started." By 1,000 hours, the custom assembly was complete. Elena held it up to the light, examining every surface, every joint. It was as close to perfect as human hands could make. "Beautiful work," Chief Torres said. "Never seen anything like it. Let's hope it works as good as it looks." They carefully packed the assembly and prepared to transport it to main engineering. But as they were loading the equipment cart, a sailor burst into the machine shop. "Commander Burke needs you in main engineering immediately, ma'am. We've got a situation." Elena's stomach dropped. "What kind of situation?" "The valve, ma'am. It's failing faster. We're getting pressure alarms across the board." They ran. Elena, Burke, Torres, Kim, and a dozen other sailors racing through the ship's passageways with equipment banging against bulkheads. When they reached main engineering, the situation was worse than she'd feared. Burke met them at the entrance, his face pale. "We're losing coolant pressure at 0.2% per hour now. At this rate, we'll hit critical thresholds in less than 8 hours. 8 hours. Elena felt her carefully constructed timeline disintegrating. "We need at least 12 for installation and testing." "I know. That's why I called you." They moved into the main space where sailors were monitoring gauges with visible anxiety. The temperature had risen noticeably, the air thick and oppressive. Elena studied the readouts, her mind racing through options. "We can't speed up the installation without risking mistakes, and we can't afford mistakes." "So what do we do?" Elena turned to Chief Torres. "How much emergency coolant reserve do we have?" "Maybe 2,000 gallons. Why?" "Because we're going to buy ourselves time. We flood the secondary cooling loop with reserve coolant, drop the temperature artificially. That'll slow the pressure decay." Burke shook his head. "That's not designed for sustained operation. We'd be putting stress on systems that aren't rated for it." "I know. but it'll give us the hours we need. Or it'll create a dozen new problems. Do you have a better idea? Burke didn't. None of them did. Make it happen, he said. The next 2 hours were controlled chaos. They reconfigured cooling systems, rerouted flows, and pushed equipment past its design limits. The temperature in the engineering spaces dropped from 120 degrees to 105, buying them precious time. But Elena knew they were borrowing against a debt that would come due soon. By 1400 hours, they were ready to begin the installation. Elena assembled her team in the cramped access tunnel. Listen carefully. We're going to shut down the primary cooling loop for exactly 45 minutes. During that window, the reactor will be operating on backup systems only. If anything goes wrong, if we can't get this installed in time, they'll have to emergency scram the reactor. If that happens, this ship is dead for months. No pressure, no mistakes, no second chances. Chief Williams grinned, his teeth white against his grease-stained face. Ma'am, you sure know how to motivate a team. Despite the tension, Elena smiled. Let's get to work. She went into the tunnel first, pulling the custom valve assembly behind her on a specially designed sled. The heat was brutal sweat pouring down her face within minutes. Behind her came Kim with tools and diagnostic equipment. Coolant shut down in 30 seconds. Burke's voice crackled through the radio. Elena positioned herself at the access point, her hands already on the first bolt. Ready? Shut down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Coolant is offline. Your clock is running. Elena worked with the practiced efficiency of decades of experience. Each bolt came free in sequence, each connection disconnected with care. Behind her, Kim fed tools forward anticipated needs before Elena could ask. They worked in perfect synchronization, 2 engineers speaking the wordless language of competence. 15 minutes in, they had the old valve exposed. Elena shone her light on it, seeing the microscopic stress fracture she'd predicted. There's our culprit. Kim, document this. I want photos and measurements. Roger that. 20 minutes. The old valve came free, and Elena carefully maneuvered it out of the tight space. Torres, I'm passing it back. Get it to the machine shop for analysis. Got it, ma'am. 25 minutes. The new valve slid into position, fitting perfectly into the space Elena had designed it for. This was the critical moment. If her measurements were off by even a fraction, it wouldn't seat properly. It clicked into place. Perfect fit, Kim breathed. Don't celebrate yet. Elena began the installation process, connecting pressure lines, torquing bolts to exact specifications. Her hands moved with absolute certainty, muscle memory taking over. 35 minutes. Burke, we're ahead of schedule. New valve is installed and secure. Roger that. Standing by for pressure test. 40 minutes. Elena backed out of the tunnel, her coveralls soaked through her muscles, screaming. Kim followed, and they both collapsed against the bulkhead. System integrity check, Burke ordered. The next 5 minutes were agony. They ran every diagnostic, checked every connection, verified every seal. Elena's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. All systems show green, the engineering watch supervisor finally reported. Pressure is holding steady. Prepare to bring the primary cooling loop back online, Burke said. They watched the gauges as coolant began flowing through the repaired system. Temperature readings stabilized, pressure normalized. Every indicator showed nominal operation. It's working, Kim said, wonder in her voice. It's actually working. Elena closed her eyes, exhaustion and relief washing over her in equal measure. Phase 1 complete. Now we need to let it run for 6 hours under observation before we attempt main engine restart. Burke helped her to her feet. You did it, Elena. You actually did it. We did it, she corrected. This was a team effort. But the celebration was short-lived. A sailor rushed into the space, his face urgent. Commander Burke, sir, you need to come to the wardroom immediately. Admiral Morrison has requested an emergency meeting with the captain. Burke and Elena exchanged glances. He's confined to quarters, Burke said. He's demanding to speak to Captain Reeves. Says he has critical information about Captain Vasquez's repair that the captain needs to know before engine restart. Elena felt ice form in her stomach. He's going to try to stop us. He can't. Your repair is successful. Doesn't matter. He'll plant doubt, raise questions, delay things until he can figure out his next move. Burke's jaw set. Then we go shut him down. together. They made their way to the wardroom where they found Morrison already in heated discussion with Captain Reeves. Admiral Thorne stood to the side, his expression murderous. "Captain Reeves, I'm telling you, this repair is untested and dangerous," Morrison was saying. "Captain Vasquez has no authority to install non-standard components on a nuclear vessel. This is a violation of naval nuclear propulsion protocols." "The repair is complete and functioning perfectly," Elena interrupted. "All diagnostics show nominal operation." Morrison wheeled on her. "For now. But you have no long-term data, no certification, no proof that this jury-rigged assembly won't fail catastrophically when you bring the engines online. You're gambling with this ship and everyone on it." "I'm fixing the problem you created," Elena shot back. "The problem you knew about and covered up. The problem that killed Chen and nearly killed a dozen sailors on the Lincoln." "Chen died in a training accident. Chen was murdered." Elena's voice rang through the wardroom. "Murdered because he was going to expose you and your contractor friends, and I can prove it." Morrison's face went white. "You have no proof of anything." "Actually," Thorne said quietly, "we do. About 30 minutes ago, I received a call from Petty Officer First Class Michael Santos, one of the witnesses to Chen's death. He's ready to testify that Chen's accident was no accident. The training weight that killed him had been tampered with. Santos saw it but was too scared to report it. Until now." The room went silent. Morrison seemed to deflate, his carefully maintained composure cracking. "You destroyed my career to protect yours," Elena said, her voice shaking with emotion. "You let a good man die. You put every sailor on ships with Nightingale installations at risk. And, for what? Contractor kickbacks, political ambitions." "You don't understand the pressure I was under," Morrison said, and for the first time he sounded human. Broken. The Secretary of the Navy himself was pushing Nightingale. The contractors had congressional support. When you submitted your report, I tried to get them to listen. I really did. But they told me to handle it to make the problem go away. And when I couldn't make you stop investigating, they made it clear that either you went or I did. So you chose yourself." "Yes," Morrison whispered. "God help me, I chose myself." And then Chen started asking questions, gathering evidence. They told me he was going to ruin everything, that he was a security risk. I swear I didn't know they were going to kill him. I thought they'd just scare him, pressure him like they did you. When I heard about the accident, I knew. But by then it was too late. I was complicit." The confession hung in the air, damning and final. Captain Reeves stood slowly. "Admiral Morrison, you're under arrest. Master-at-Arms, take him into custody." As Morrison was led away, he paused at the door, looking back at Elena. "For what it's worth, you were right. About everything. I'm sorry." Elena said nothing. Some apologies came too late to matter. After Morrison was gone, Thorne approached her. "Elena Santos is willing to testify, but he's asking for immunity. He says there are others involved, people still in the Navy. This goes deeper than just Morrison." "How deep?" "That's what we need to find out. But right now you have a more immediate problem. Your repair needs to be tested under full power, and technically without proper certification, you shouldn't be the one to do it." Elena straightened, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders again. "Who else knows this system like I do? Who else can monitor it during startup and shut it down if something goes wrong?" Reeves nodded. "She's right. Captain Vasquez, I'm temporarily authorizing you as a special consultant to the engineering department. You'll oversee the engine restart personally." "Thank you, sir." Burke stepped forward. "Captain, with your permission, I'd like Captain Vasquez to have full access to engineering spaces and authority to give orders necessary for safe operation." "Granted. Get my ship moving, both of you." 4 hours later, after extensive monitoring and preparation, they were ready. Elena stood in main engineering, surrounded by Burke's team, all of them watching the readouts with mixture of hope and anxiety. "Reactor is stable," the watch supervisor reported. "All systems nominal." "Begin main engine startup sequence," Burke ordered. The massive turbines began to spin slowly at first, then faster. The deck plates vibrated with familiar power. Every gauge, every sensor, every indicator showed green. 70% power, the supervisor called. 80%. This was where they'd failed before, where the system had shut down every time. Elena held her breath. 90%. 100%. Main engines online. All systems nominal. A cheer erupted from the engineering team. Sailors hugged each other, some crying with relief. They'd been fighting this problem for days, watching their ship lie helpless, and now finally they were whole again. Burke grabbed Elena's hand and shook it hard. You did it. Damn it, Elena, you actually did it. Elena felt tears streaming down her face, not from relief, but from something deeper. Vindication, redemption, the knowledge that 15 years of silence had finally ended in truth. No, she said, her voice thick with emotion. We did it. All of us. Above them, throughout the ship, sailors felt the familiar vibration of power returning. On the bridge, Captain Reeves gave the order that had been impossible for 4 days. All ahead flank. Let's show the world the Constellation is back. The carrier surged forward, cutting through the Pacific swells with renewed purpose. In main engineering, Elena stayed at her post, monitoring her repair, ready to act if anything went wrong. But nothing did. The custom valve assembly performed flawlessly, better than the original design. The ship that had been dead was alive again, and this time it was built on truth instead of lies. Thorne found her there hours later, still monitoring gauges even though every indicator showed perfect operation. You should get some rest, he said. Can't. Not yet. Not until I'm sure. Elena, it's working. You saved this ship. She turned to face him, exhausted, but unbowed. I saved one ship, Marcus. But Morrison said there were people still in the Navy who were part of the cover-up. How many other ships have Nightingale installations? How many other time bombs are we sailing around with? That's what the investigation will determine. And how long will that take? Months, years? How many sailors are at risk right now? Thorne had no answer. Elena looked back at her repair at the system she'd saved through skill and determination and refusal to accept convenient lies. This isn't over. Not even close. Morrison was just one piece. We need to find the others. We will, but not tonight. Tonight you rest. Elena finally nodded, letting the exhaustion she'd been fighting for 30 hours claim her. As she walked toward her temporary quarters, sailors stopped her in the passageways, thanking her, some of them with tears in their eyes. They didn't fully understand what she'd done or what it had cost, but they knew their ship was alive because of her. In her quarters, Elena fell onto the narrow bed without even removing her coveralls. Sleep claimed her immediately, deep and dreamless, but in her dreams, Chen was there, smiling, giving her a thumbs up. Good work, Elle, he said. We're not done, but it's a start. When she woke 12 hours later, the Constellation was making 30 knots toward the South China Sea, ready to take her place in the fleet once more. And Elena Vasquez, retired captain and reluctant hero, was about to discover that fixing the ship had been the easy part. The real battle, the battle for truth, was just beginning. Elena woke to the sound of someone pounding on her door. For a disoriented moment, she thought she was back on the Lincoln back in 2010, and Chen was waking her for the mid-watch. Then reality crashed back. Captain Vasquez, you need to come to the communications center, now. She rolled out of bed, her body protesting every movement. 12 hours of sleep hadn't been nearly enough. What's happened? It's Admiral Thorne, ma'am. He says it's urgent. 5 minutes later, still in her rumpled coveralls, Elena entered the communications center. Thorne was hunched over a secure terminal, his face illuminated by the blue glow of the screen. He looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. Tell me you found something, Elena said. Thorne gestured to the screen. Santos didn't just witness Chen's murder. He took photos. He was doing a maintenance inspection in the overhead when the accident happened, and he had his phone out. He documented everything. Elena leaned in her stomach, churning as she looked at the images. Chen lying on the deck, the massive training weight beside him. But more importantly, the rigging for the weight clearly showing fresh tool marks where someone had deliberately weakened the support cable. This is murder evidence, she breathed. It gets worse. Thorne pulled up another file. Santos also recorded a conversation he overheard 2 days before Chen died. Two officers discussing how Chen was becoming a problem, how he needed to be dealt with. One of the voices matches Admiral Morrison's, the other— Thorne paused, his face grim. The other belongs to Captain Richard Walsh, who's now serving as the Chief of Staff for Pacific Fleet. Elena felt her legs go weak. Walsh is Morrison's superior. If he was involved, then the cover-up goes right to the top of the Pacific Fleet command structure. Elena, we're not dealing with one corrupt admiral. We're dealing with a conspiracy that's protected itself for 15 years. How many people are involved? That's what we need to find out. But here's the immediate problem Walsh knows about Morrison's arrest. He knows we have Chen's notebook. He's going to be moving to protect himself, which means destroying evidence and silencing witnesses. Santos is at risk. Santos is already in protective custody. I had him picked up 2 hours ago and flown to a secure facility. But Elena, he's not the only witness. Chen told Santos he'd hidden copies of his evidence in multiple locations. He gave Santos a list of places, but it's in code. Santos doesn't know what it means. Thorne showed her a photograph of a handwritten note. It was Chen's writing. Elena recognized it immediately, neat, precise engineer's printing. But the content made no sense. Nightingale sings in the Chapel of Steel where the old warriors sleep, Elena read aloud. The truth lives in the heart of the city that never stops. The proof waits where the sky meets the sea and the giants are born. Mean anything to you? Thorne asked. Elena studied the phrases, her mind working through possibilities. Chen loved riddles. He used to quiz me during long watches, said it kept the brain sharp. These have to be locations where he hid evidence. But where? Give me time. I need to think like Chen. She read the phrases again, focusing on each word. The Chapel of Steel where old warriors sleep. That could be a ship. Decommissioned carriers go to the Naval Inactive Ship Maintenance Facility. It's literally a graveyard of old warships. Thorne nodded slowly. That's in Philadelphia, the heart of the city that never stops, New York. Maybe, but Chen served most of his career on the West Coast. He might mean San Francisco. Never stops could mean the cable cars, the trolleys, and the last one where sky meets sea and giants are born. That sounds like a shipyard. Newport News Shipbuilding, Thorne said with sudden certainty. Where carriers are built, where the giants are born. Chen did a tour there as an instructor before he came to the Lincoln. Elena felt excitement building. Marcus, if Chen hid evidence in 3 different locations, and he documented everything like we think he did, we're talking about enough proof to bring down everyone involved in this cover-up. Assuming the evidence is still there after 15 years. Chen was careful. He wouldn't hide it somewhere it could be easily found or destroyed. Elena paused, then said quietly, he knew they might kill him. He was preparing for it. Thorne's jaw tightened. Then we owe it to him to find what he left behind. I'll arrange travel. We'll start with— The communications center door burst open and Commander Burke rushed in, his face pale. Admiral, Captain, we just received a flash message from Pacific Fleet. Captain Walsh has been promoted to acting commander during Morrison's investigation. His first order is to recall the Constellation to Pearl Harbor immediately for a complete propulsion system inspection by a new engineering team. They're questioning Captain Vasquez's repair and want it removed and replaced with factory-certified components. Elena felt her blood run cold. He's trying to destroy my work before anyone can verify it proves Morrison's cover-up. It's worse than that, Burke said. The inspection team he's sending is from Patterson Defense Systems, the same contractor that built the original flawed components. That's not an inspection, Thorne said. That's evidence destruction. If they remove Elena's repair and replace it with their components, we lose our proof that the original design was defective. Can you override the order? Elena asked. Not without going above Walsh, and that means the CNO. But Walsh has been preparing for this. He's already convinced half of Pacific Fleet that Morrison was a scapegoat, that the real problem is unauthorized civilian contractors making dangerous modifications to nuclear vessels. He's spinning the narrative, Elena said bitterly, making me the villain instead of the whistleblower. Burke stepped forward. We could refuse to comply. Claim operational necessity. The Constellation is needed for the freedom of navigation exercise. We can't spare the time for an inspection. That buys us maybe 48 hours before Walsh sends the 7th Fleet to escort us back to Pearl under guard, Thorne said. No, we need evidence, and we need it fast. Evidence so damning that Walsh can't spin it away. Elena made a decision. Then we go get it. Marcus, you stay here and hold the line politically. Stall Walsh, buy us time. Commander Burke, I need a helicopter and a pilot who doesn't ask questions. Where are you going? Philadelphia. If Chen hid evidence on a decommissioned ship, I'm going to find it before Walsh can have it destroyed. Elena, that's insane. You can't just... I can and I will. Chen died protecting that evidence. I'm not letting his sacrifice be for nothing. Thorne studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, but you're not going alone. Burke, go with her. Sir, I can't leave my ship. Your ship is fine. Your repair is solid. But Captain Vasquez needs someone watching her back, and you're the only person I trust for that job. Burke looked at Elena, then back at Thorne. Aye, sir. When do we leave? Now, Elena said, before Walsh realizes what we're doing. 2 hours later, Elena and Burke were in a Navy helicopter racing toward the East Coast. They'd left the Constellation under cover of a routine logistics flight with forged orders that would hold up for maybe a day before someone started asking questions. Burke sat across from her looking deeply uncomfortable with the whole situation. I've never disobeyed orders before, he shouted over the engine noise. You're not disobeying. You're following the spirit of the law instead of the letter. That's what every officer says right before their court-martial. Elena couldn't help but smile. Welcome to my world, Commander. It's terrifying, but at least it's honest. They stopped to refuel in San Diego, where Elena made a quick call to her office. Her assistant, Marie, answered on the first ring. Elena, where the hell are you? I've had 3 calls from Navy lawyers asking about your whereabouts. Tell them I'm consulting on a classified project and you don't know when I'll be back. Marie, I need you to do something for me. Pull every file we have on Patterson Defense Systems, every contract, every project, every executive. I need to know who they paid off and when. That's going to take time. You have 12 hours. After that, it won't matter. Elena hung up before Marie could argue. Burke was watching her with something between admiration and horror. You know this could ruin your business, right? The Navy will blacklist you. They already did that once. I survived. That was different. You were military then, you had your pension. This time they could prosecute you for interfering with a federal investigation. Elena met his eyes. Commander, how many ships in the Pacific Fleet have Nightingale installations? Classified, but if I had to guess, probably 20. And how many sailors on those ships? 15, maybe 20,000. That's 20,000 people serving on ships, with hidden time bombs in their propulsion systems. 20,000 sailors who trust that their equipment was designed and tested properly. Chen died trying to protect them. I'm not going to fail them twice. Burke was quiet for a long moment. You really believe that, don't you? That this is worth risking everything? Don't you? Burke thought about his daughter, about the Navy he wanted her to serve in. A Navy where truth mattered more than politics, where competence mattered more than connections. Yeah, he said finally. I do. They landed in Philadelphia just after midnight. The Naval Inactive Ship Maintenance Facility was a ghost town of decommissioned warships, massive gray hulks moored in neat rows waiting for either reactivation or the scrapyard. The security was minimal. A few guards, some cameras, nothing that couldn't be bypassed by someone with the right credentials. Elena flashed her contractor ID and spun a story about needing to inspect a component for a historical preservation project. The night guard, bored and underpaid, waved them through without much interest. Which ship? Burke asked as they walked along the pier. Chen served on the USS Kitty Hawk before the Lincoln. If he hid something in a chapel of steel, that's where I'd look. They found the Kitty Hawk at the far end of the facility, a massive carrier that had once projected American power across the Pacific, now rusting slowly in the brackish water. It looked like a dying giant, magnificent even in decay. Getting aboard required climbing a rickety maintenance ladder. Elena went first, her muscles protesting the exertion after days of stress and minimal sleep. Burke followed, and together they crossed the deserted flight deck. Where would he hide something on a ship this size? Burke asked. There are hundreds of compartments. Chapel of Steel, Elena murmured, thinking. Chen wasn't religious, but he respected those who were. On carriers, the chapel is usually but. She stopped, sudden understanding flooding through her. Not an actual chapel. The engine room. That was Chen's chapel. That's where he felt closest to God in the machinery. They descended into the bowels of the ship using flashlights to navigate the dark abandoned passageways. The smell was overwhelming, rust, stagnant water, and decay. Everything of value had been stripped out years ago, leaving only the bones of what had once been a living ship. The main machinery room was vast and empty, the turbines long since removed, but the structure remained the catwalks and access tunnels and thousand hidden spaces that only engineers knew existed. Okay, we're here, Burke said. Now what? Elena closed her eyes, trying to think like Chen. Where would he hide something that needed to stay hidden for years, but could still be found by someone who knew him? His favorite tool was a custom-made inspection mirror, she said slowly. He called it his third eye, said it let him see what others missed. He kept it in. She opened her eyes and strode toward a specific section of the machinery room, toward an access panel that would have led to the fuel system monitoring station. She pulled open the panel, shining her light inside. There, taped to the inside of the panel with military-grade adhesive, was a waterproof pouch. Found it, she breathed. She carefully removed the pouch, her hands shaking. Inside was a USB drive and a letter sealed in plastic. The letter was addressed to her. Elle, if you're reading this, I'm probably dead. I'm sorry I couldn't stop them, but I documented everything. The USB has meetings, emails, financial records showing Patterson's payments to Morrison and Walsh. It has testimony from 3 other engineers who knew about the Nightingale flaw and were pressured to stay quiet. One of them died in a car accident 6 months after Morrison classified your report. I don't think that was coincidence. I'm leaving 2 more copies in places you'll figure out. If something happens to me, make them pay. Make them all pay. You were always the bravest person I knew. Don't lose that. Your friend always, Chen. Elena felt tears streaming down her face. Burke stood beside her, reading over her shoulder. He knew, Burke said quietly. He knew they were going to kill him. And he prepared for it. Elena wiped her eyes and carefully put the USB drive in her pocket. Come on. We need to get this somewhere safe. They were halfway back across the flight deck when Burke's phone buzzed. He checked it and his face went pale. Elena, we have a problem. That guard we passed, he just sent a report to Pacific Fleet Security saying 2 unauthorized personnel were spotted boarding the Kitty Hawk. Walsh's office was copied on the alert. How long do we have? If Walsh is moving fast, maybe 3 hours before they have people here to intercept us. Then we move faster. We need to get to New York, find whatever Chen hid there. They ran for the helicopter, but when they reached the landing zone, they found it wasn't alone. A black SUV was parked next to their aircraft, and 2 men in civilian clothes were talking to their pilot. Elena pulled Burke behind a building. Federal agents. How can you tell the earpieces the way they're standing, the fact that they're here in the middle of the night? Walsh called in favors. He's using federal resources to stop us. We're trapped. Elena looked around desperately. The facility was surrounded by water on 3 sides, fenced on the 4th. No easy way out. Then she saw a small civilian fishing boat tied up at a public dock just outside the facility fence. It wasn't much, but it was something. Can you hotwire a boat? She asked. Burke stared at her. Are you serious? Do you have a better idea? I'm an engineering officer, not a criminal. Then today you learn a new skill. Come on. They circled around the facility, staying in the shadows, avoiding security cameras. The fence was 10 feet high with barbed wire on top, but there was a drainage culvert that ran under it. They crawled through on their bellies, emerging muddy and scraped, but outside the facility. The fishing boat was old, but seaworthy. Burke, muttering about his impending court-martial, managed to bypass the ignition using a trick he'd learned from a chief petty officer years ago. The engine coughed to life. Where are we going? He asked as they pulled away from the dock. Down the coast. We'll find another way to New York. Behind them they could hear shouting as the federal agents realized their targets were escaping. But by then, Elena and Burke were disappearing into the darkness of the Delaware River, carrying evidence that could bring down the highest levels of the Pacific Fleet Command. They ditched the boat in a small marina in New Jersey and caught a train to New York. Elena spent the journey studying Chen's USB drive on Burke's laptop, her heart sinking with every file she opened. "This is worse than I thought," she said. Patterson didn't just bribe Morrison and Walsh. They bought off 3 congressmen, 2 Pentagon acquisition officers, and half a dozen Navy engineers. The Nightingale project was worth $800 million to them. They weren't going to let one captain's report derail that. "Can we prove it?" Burke asked. Chen documented financial transfers, recorded conversations, collected internal memos. "This is ironclad evidence of fraud, corruption, and conspiracy to commit murder. Then why are we still running, take this to the CNO, to the Justice Department?" Elena looked at him. "Commander Walsh has been preparing for this moment for 15 years. You think he doesn't have contingency plans? The moment we surface, he'll move to discredit us. He'll claim the evidence is fabricated, that we're disgruntled former employees with an axe to grind. He'll use his political connections to bury this in committees and investigations that take years. And while that's happening, sailors on 20 ships are still at risk. So what do? We get the other 2 copies of Chen's evidence. With 3 independent caches all documenting the same crimes, it becomes impossible to dismiss. Then we don't take it to the Navy. We take it to the press." Burke looked horrified. "That's career suicide for both of us." "Probably, but it's also the only way to force accountability before more people die." The train pulled into Penn Station just after dawn. They emerged into the chaos of New York City. 2 exhausted people in dirty clothes carrying the future of the Navy's integrity in a plastic pouch. "The heart of the city that never stops," Elena murmured. "Where would Chen hide something in New York?" "He served here at some point," Burke asked. "He was stationed at Fort Hamilton for 2 years, Brooklyn. But that's a huge area." Elena closed her eyes, thinking. The city that never stops. He always talked about how New York ran on infrastructure that people never saw. The subways, the power grid, the water system. "Water system," Burke said slowly. Chen was a propulsion engineer. Water systems would appeal to him. "The old Croton Aqueduct," Elena said suddenly. "It's a decommissioned water tunnel that runs under the city. Chen and I visited it once during a Liberty call. He was fascinated by it, said it reminded him of a ship hidden infrastructure that kept everything running." They took the subway to the Bronx, to an access point Elena remembered from 15 years ago. The aqueduct was officially closed to the public, but Elena had never been much for following rules. They found an old maintenance entrance, forced the rusted lock, and descended into the darkness. The tunnel was massive, a brick-lined cathedral of civil engineering. Their footsteps echoed in the emptiness as they followed the main passage deeper underground. "How do we find anything in here?" Burke asked, his voice betraying his exhaustion. Chen would have marked it somehow, something only someone who knew him would recognize. They searched for an hour, Elena growing increasingly desperate. What if she was wrong? What if Chen had hidden the evidence somewhere else entirely? Then she saw it. A small mark scratched into the brick wall, barely visible in the beam of her flashlight. It was the symbol for a gas turbine, the schematic representation that engineers used in technical drawings. Chen's signature. Below the mark was a loose brick. Elena pulled it free and reached into the cavity behind it. Her fingers closed on another waterproof pouch. "Got it," she said, relief flooding through her. But before she could open it, she heard footsteps echoing in the tunnel. Multiple sets moving fast, coming from the direction they'd entered. "Someone followed us," Burke hissed. They ran deeper into the tunnel, but the footsteps were getting closer. Elena's mind raced through options. They were trapped in a linear tunnel with pursuers behind them, and no idea what was ahead. "There," Burke said, pointing to a side passage. "Maybe we can lose them." They ducked into the smaller tunnel, which quickly narrowed to the point where they had to move single file. Behind them, flashlight beams were sweeping the main passage. The side tunnel opened into an abandoned pump room filled with rusted equipment and standing water. There was another exit on the far side. "Come on," Elena said, splashing through the water. They emerged in a different section of the aqueduct system, this one showing signs of recent maintenance. Electric lights were strung along the ceiling and the brick walls had been reinforced with modern materials. "This is still active," Burke said. "Part of the city's backup water system." They followed the passage until it ended at a modern security door with an electronic keypad. They were trapped. The footsteps behind them were getting louder. Voices echoed off the brick walls. "Find them. They can't have gone far." Elena recognized the voice. It was Captain Walsh. "He came himself," she whispered. "That means he's desperate." "Or confident we're trapped," Burke replied. Elena examined the security door. It had a standard Navy-issue lock, the same type used on ships. She'd bypassed dozens of them over her career. "Give me 60 seconds, she said, pulling out a small toolkit she always carried. "We don't have 60 seconds. "Then talk to them. Buy me time." Burke stepped back toward the approaching footsteps. "Captain Walsh, I'm Commander Jackson Burke, Chief Engineer of the USS Constellation. I'm here to surrender myself and Captain Vasquez into your custody." Walsh appeared around the corner, flanked by 2 security officers. He was a tall man, silver-haired like Morrison, but harder. Where Morrison had been a politician, Walsh was a true believer. "Commander Burke," Walsh said, his voice echoing, "you've made some extremely poor decisions in the last 24 hours. "I've made the right decisions, sir. We have evidence that proves—" "You have stolen materials obtained through illegal means," Walsh interrupted, "breaking and entering, theft of government property, destruction of evidence. Captain Vasquez has corrupted you, Commander, just like she corrupted Admiral Morrison's investigation 15 years ago." "That's a lie," Burke said. "Morrison confessed to covering up the Nightingale flaw. He confessed to being involved in Chief Chen's death. Morrison was mentally unstable, breaking under stress. His so-called confession is worthless. But your actions, Commander, breaking into secure facilities, stealing from decommissioned ships, those are crimes I can prove." Behind Burke, Elena worked frantically at the lock. The mechanism was old stubborn, but her fingers remembered the technique. "Come on," she thought. "Come on." "Sir, please," Burke said, playing for time. "Just look at the evidence." Chen documented everything: the bribes, the cover-up, the threats. He recorded conversations that prove you and Morrison knew sailors were at risk. Walsh's expression hardened. Chen was a paranoid junior officer who couldn't accept that his superiors knew better than he did. He created elaborate fantasies about conspiracies that didn't exist. His death was a tragedy, but it was an accident. "Then explain the photos," Burke said. "Santos took photos of Chen's body, of the rigging that had been tampered with. Photos that prove nothing except that an accident occurred during a training evolution." The lock clicked open. Elena pulled the door wide and grabbed Burke's arm. "Time to go." They ran through the door, slamming it behind them. The passage beyond led up a long stairwell toward daylight and noise. They were coming up under a busy street. Walsh was shouting orders to his men, telling them to secure all exits. But Elena knew these old systems better than he did. She'd spent years studying infrastructure, learning the hidden arteries of cities and ships. She led Burke through a maze of passages, always moving up, always toward the surface. They emerged in Central Park through an old maintenance access that most New Yorkers didn't even know existed. Behind them, they could hear Walsh and his men trying to follow, but they'd lost precious minutes navigating the unfamiliar tunnels. Elena and Burke ran through the park, losing themselves in the morning crowds of joggers and dog walkers. They didn't stop until they'd put half a mile between themselves and the aqueduct entrance. "We can't keep running," Burke panted. "Walsh has resources we can't match." "I know." Elena pulled out her phone and made a call. "Marie, it's me. Did you get that information on Patterson?" "Elena, where are you? The Navy is looking for you. So is the FBI." "Did you get the information?" Marie sighed. "Yes. Patterson Defense Systems has been paying consulting fees to a shell company owned by Captain Walsh for the last 12 years. Over $3 million total. Can you prove it?" "I've got financial records, tax documents, everything." "Elena, this is serious fraud. Send everything to my email. Then call the Washington Post, the New York Times, and every major news outlet you can think of. Tell them you have evidence of a major Navy corruption scandal and you'll give it to whoever publishes first." "Elena, do it, Marie, and then get yourself somewhere safe. Walsh is going to come after anyone connected to this." She hung up and looked at Burke. "One more location, Newport News." That's where we end this. We'll never make it. Walsh knows our pattern now. He'll have every military installation locked down. Then we don't go through military channels. Elena flagged down a taxi. We go civilian. Rent a car drive to Virginia, stay off the grid. And when we get there, we find the last piece of Chen's evidence. And then we make sure the whole world knows what Walsh and Morrison and Patterson did. The taxi pulled up. As they climbed in, Elena looked back toward the park, toward the hidden tunnels where they'd narrowly escaped. Walsh was still out there using all his power and influence to stop them. But Chen had prepared for this. He'd built a trail of breadcrumbs for someone brave enough to follow. And Elena Vasquez had never backed down from a fight, not when the truth was on the line. They were going to finish what Chen started, even if it cost them everything. The rental car smelled like stale coffee and broken dreams. Elena drove through the night while Burke tried to sleep in the passenger seat, his head bouncing against the window with every bump in the road. They'd paid cash, used fake names, done everything they could to stay invisible. But Elena knew it wouldn't last long. Walsh had the full weight of the Pacific Fleet behind him, and people like that didn't lose easily. Her phone buzzed. Marie. "The Post is interested," Marie said without preamble. "But they want to verify the documents independently. They're saying 24 hours minimum." "We don't have 24 hours. "I know. Elena, the FBI showed up at the office an hour ago. They have a warrant for your arrest. Conspiracy theft of classified materials, obstruction of justice. They're serious." Elena's hands tightened on the wheel. "What did you tell them?" "That I haven't heard from you in 3 days. They didn't believe me, but they left. Elena, they're watching the office now. Watching my apartment. I had to sneak out through the building's service entrance." "I'm sorry, Marie. I never meant to drag you into this. Don't apologize. Just finish it. Whatever you're doing, finish it before they catch you." Marie paused. "There's something else. I got a call from a blocked number. A woman wouldn't give her name. She said she was an engineer who worked on Nightingale, said she's been living in fear for 15 years. She wants to go on record, but only if you can guarantee her safety." "Did she leave contact information?" "A secure email. She's waiting for your response." Elena felt a spark of hope. Another witness, someone from inside the project. That could be the difference between a corruption scandal and a criminal conspiracy case. "Send me her information. Tell her I'll protect her, but she needs to go public fast. Once the story breaks, Walsh can't touch her without exposing himself." "Okay. Elena, be careful. Walsh has friends in places you don't want to think about." After Marie hung up, Burke stirred awake. "Who was that?" "Backup. Maybe." Elena told him about the engineer. Burke rubbed his face. "If she's real and not a trap, she could corroborate everything Chen documented." "That's what I'm hoping." They drove in silence for another hour, the highway stretching endlessly ahead. Elena's mind was racing through scenarios, contingencies, all the ways this could go wrong. Walsh would be tracking them, narrowing the search radius with every passing hour. Once they reached Newport News, they'd be walking into the heart of Navy shipbuilding country Walsh's territory. "I've been thinking," Burke said suddenly, "about what happens after. If we survive this, if we expose Walsh and Patterson and everyone involved, what happens to the Navy?" "The Navy survives. It always does." "But the trust, Elena. How do sailors trust their equipment after this? How do junior officers trust their superiors? We're not just exposing corruption. We're tearing down the institutional credibility of the entire fleet." Elena glanced at him. "You having second thoughts?" "No, but I'm scared. Not of Walsh or prison or losing my career. I'm scared that we're destroying something important, something bigger than us. The Navy isn't the institution, Commander. It's the people. The sailors doing their jobs, the chiefs training the next generation, the engineers keeping the ships running. Those people deserve better than leaders who trade their lives for contractor kickbacks. We're not destroying the Navy, we're trying to save it." Burke nodded slowly. "My daughter asked me once why I joined the service. I told her it was because I wanted to be part of something that mattered, something that stood for something. If I back down now, if I let Walsh bury the truth, what do I tell her?" You tell her you did the right thing, even when it was hard. They reached Newport News just before dawn. The massive shipyard sprawled along the waterfront cranes, rising like skeletal giants against the lightening sky. This was where American carriers were born, where steel and engineering and human determination came together to create the most powerful warships on Earth. Where the sky meets the sea and the giants are born, Elena murmured. Chen, you beautiful bastard. So where did he hide it? Burke asked. Elena thought about Chen, about the way his mind worked. He'd been an instructor here teaching young engineers the art of propulsion systems. He would have had access to places most people never saw. The apprentice school, she said suddenly. Chen taught there for 18 months. He loved that place, said it reminded him why he joined the Navy. If he wanted to hide something where it would be safe but findable, he'd put it somewhere that meant something to him. The apprentice school was a massive facility where thousands of young men and women learned shipbuilding trades. Elena and Burke walked through the gates as the first shift was arriving, blending into the crowd of workers in coveralls and hard hats. Nobody questioned them in a shipyard this size. With thousands of employees, 2 more people were invisible. Elena led them to the engineering building, to the classrooms where Chen had taught gas turbine theory. The place hadn't changed much in 15 years. Same linoleum floors, same industrial green paint, same smell of machine oil and chalk dust. Which classroom? Burke asked. He had a favorite, room 312. He said the view reminded him of being underway. They climbed to the 3rd floor and found the room unlocked, empty in the early morning quiet. Elena walked to Chen's old desk at the front of the class and sat down, trying to see the room through his eyes. The view out the window showed the James River and the carrier construction dry docks. It was a view of possibility, of ships being born, of American power taking shape. Chen had stood here hundreds of times teaching the next generation of engineers. Where would he hide something? Elena opened the desk drawers. Empty. She checked under the desk behind the whiteboard in the supply cabinets. Nothing. Maybe we're wrong about the location, Burke said. No, this is right. I can feel it. Elena looked around the room again, frustrated. Come on, Chen. Where are you? Then she saw it. On the wall behind the desk was a framed diagram of a gas turbine engine, the kind of technical poster every engineering classroom had. But something about this one was off. The frame was newer than it should be, the glass too clean. She lifted the frame off the wall. Taped to the back was another waterproof pouch. Found it. Inside was a USB drive, a letter, and something that made Elena's heart stop, a videotape. An actual VHS tape, old school and obsolete, but protected in its plastic case like a treasure. What's on the tape? Burke asked. I don't know. But Chen wouldn't have used this format unless it was something he couldn't risk being digital, something that couldn't be hacked or remotely destroyed. Elena opened the letter. It was longer than the others, written in Chen's careful hand. L, if you've made it this far, you've found all 3 caches. That means you're serious about finishing what I started. The tape is my insurance policy. It's a recording of a meeting between Morrison Walsh and executives from Patterson Defense Systems. They discuss the Nightingale flaw, acknowledge that it could cause casualties, and agree to hide it to protect the contract. They talk about dealing with me, about making sure I don't become a problem. I recorded it without their knowledge during a classified briefing I was ordered to attend. It's the smoking gun, Elena. Everything else is documentation, but this is them, in their own words, confessing to conspiracy to commit fraud and discussing obstruction of justice. The reason I used VHS is because it can't be edited without leaving obvious traces. Digital files can be manipulated, but this is analog. Get it to the press, to the Inspector General, to anyone who can't be bought. Make them listen. And Elena, one more thing. If you're watching this, if you're reading this letter, it means I'm gone. Don't mourn me. I made my choice knowing the risks. I chose truth over comfort, and I'd make the same choice again. You taught me that. You showed me what real courage looks like when you stood up to Morrison the first time. Now it's your turn to finish the fight. I believe in you. Always have. Your friend Chen. Elena's vision blurred with tears. Burke read over her shoulder, his own eyes wet. He knew. Burke said. He knew exactly what would happen to him. And he did it anyway. Elena carefully folded the letter and put it back in the pouch. We need to find a way to watch this tape. Have VHS players. In 2025, that's going to be... The door burst open. 3 men in dark suits, FBI badges already out. Elena Vasquez, Jackson, Burke, you're both under arrest. Hands where we can see them. Elena's mind raced. The evidence was in her hands, but if she surrendered now, Walsh would make sure it disappeared. The FBI agents weren't corrupt. She could see it in their faces. Young guys doing their jobs, but they didn't understand what they were interfering with. Agent, listen to me, Elena said, holding up the pouch. This contains evidence of a criminal conspiracy involving high-ranking Navy officers and defense contractors. People have died to protect this secret. If you take us into custody, this evidence will disappear. The lead agent, a clean-cut man in his 30s, shook his head. Ma'am, you're wanted for multiple federal crimes. You need to come with us now. We're not criminals, Burke said. We're trying to expose corruption. That's what they all say. Now hands up, both of you. Elena looked at Burke. She could see him calculating the same odds she was. If they fought, they'd lose. If they ran, they'd be caught. If they surrendered, Walsh won. Unless, Agent, what's your name? Elena asked. Special Agent Martinez. Now. Agent Martinez, I'm going to make you a deal. Take us into custody. Take the evidence. But before you hand it over to anyone, watch the videotape. Get yourself a VHS player, which I know the FBI still has in evidence labs, and watch what's on this tape. If after watching it you still think we're the criminals, fine, charge us. But if that tape shows what I think it shows, you'll understand why we ran. Martinez exchanged glances with his partners. We're not making deals. I'm not asking for a deal. I'm asking you to do your job. We have evidence of a crime. We're giving it to you willingly. All I'm asking is that you look at it before letting the people who committed those crimes destroy it. Martinez studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, but you're still coming into custody. Fair enough. They were handcuffed and led out of the building. Workers stared as they were loaded into an FBI vehicle, but Elena felt oddly calm. She'd done all she could. The evidence was in federal hands now. Either Martinez would watch the tape and understand, or he wouldn't. Either way, it was out of her control. They were taken to the FBI field office in Norfolk, separated, and placed in interview rooms. Elena sat alone for what felt like hours, watching the clock on the wall tick away minutes. She thought about Chen, about Morrison, about all the sailors serving on ships with hidden flaws in their propulsion systems. She thought about Burke's daughter, about the Navy that girl would inherit. Finally, the door opened. Martinez entered, and his face had changed. The professional neutrality was gone, replaced by something harder. I watched the tape, he said quietly, twice. And then I called my supervisor and made him watch it. And you were right. What's on that tape? Jesus Christ, Captain Vasquez. Those men are discussing conspiracy to commit fraud and obstruction of justice, like they're ordering lunch. They laugh about Chen being a problem that needs solving. Walsh says, and I quote, accidents happen to people who don't know when to shut up. Morrison agrees. They discuss monetary figures, payoffs, who they need to keep quiet. It's the most clear-cut evidence of conspiracy I've ever seen. Elena felt relief wash through her. So, you understand why we ran. I understand that you've been trying to expose a massive criminal conspiracy, yes. But Captain Vasquez, why didn't you come to us first? To the FBI, to the Inspector General? Why all the cloak and dagger? Because 15 years ago, I did go through proper channels. I reported the flaw, filed complaints, followed every procedure, and I was destroyed for it. My career was ended, my reputation ruined, and a good man was murdered. You have to understand, Agent Martinez Walsh has been preparing for this day for 15 years. He has contingency plans, political connections, people in every level of government who owe him favors. If we'd walked into an FBI office with this evidence, he would have known within hours. And evidence has a way of disappearing when powerful people want it to. Martinez sat down across from her. We're not all corrupt, Captain. I know, but the system is broken enough that corrupt people can hide in it. That's what Walsh has been counting on. Well, he counted wrong. Martinez pulled out his phone and showed her a news alert. Your assistant Marie, she went ahead and released the documents to multiple news outlets simultaneously. It broke 20 minutes ago. The Washington Post, New York Times, CNN, they're all running stories about Navy corruption and the Nightingale cover-up. Walsh can't contain it now. It's public. Elena felt tears spring to her eyes again. Marie had done it. She'd gotten the story out. What happens now? Elena asked. Now we arrest Captain Walsh, Admiral Morrison, and about a dozen other people. We're coordinating with NCIS and the Navy's Inspector General. This is going to be the biggest military corruption case in decades. He paused. As for you and Commander Burke, you're still facing charges. Breaking and entering theft, those are real crimes even if you were doing them for the right reasons. I understand. But, Martinez continued, between you and me, I can't imagine a prosecutor who's going to want to be the person who charges the whistleblowers after what's on that tape, and I'm going to personally recommend to my superiors that all charges be dropped in exchange for your cooperation as witnesses. Thank you. Martinez stood. No, Captain Vasquez, thank you. You and Chen, you did what a lot of people wouldn't have the courage to do. You stood up when it would have been easier to stay quiet. After Martinez left, Elena was allowed to call Admiral Thorne. He answered on the first ring. Elena, where the hell are you? Walsh has half the fleet looking for you. Norfolk FBI office. In custody, but it's okay. Marcus, we found all 3 caches of evidence. The FBI has everything, including a videotape that destroys Walsh's defense. And Marie released the documents to the press. It's over. We won. Thorne was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. Chen would be proud. Chen made it possible. He knew they'd kill him, and he prepared for it anyway. That's courage, Marcus. Real courage. The CNO just called me. Emergency meeting in Washington tomorrow. They're going to clean house Elena, Morrison, Walsh, everyone involved, and they want you there to testify. I'll be there. There's something else. The inspection team Walsh sent to the Constellation, they arrived while you were running. But Captain Reeves refused to let them touch your repair. He told them that until he had written orders from the CNO himself, no one was modifying anything on his ship. He put his career on the line for you. Elena smiled. Good man. We're all good people, Elena. We just needed someone to remind us what that means. Burke was released an hour later. They met in the FBI office lobby, both of them looking exhausted but vindicated. I just got off the phone with my wife, Burke said. She asked me if I'd lost my mind. I told her maybe I'd finally found it. What did she say? She said she married me because I was a good man and good men do hard things. Then she told me she was proud of me. Burke's voice broke slightly. I'm going to lose my command over this, aren't I? Probably. But you'll keep your honor. That counts for more. They walked out of the building together into the bright Virginia sunlight. News vans were already gathering outside the Newport News shipyard. The story was spreading, growing, taking on a life of its own. By tomorrow, everyone would know about Nightingale, about the cover-up, about Chen's sacrifice. Elena's phone rang again, a blocked number. Captain Vasquez. A woman's voice, nervous but determined. My name is Dr. Sarah Chen. No relation to your Chief Chen, but I knew him. I was the lead metallurgist on Project Nightingale. I'm the one who first identified the stress fracture problem in the valve assemblies. I'm the engineer your assistant mentioned. Dr. Chen, thank you for calling. I should have come forward years ago, but I was scared. They threatened my career, my family. I have 2 kids, Captain. I couldn't risk it. But I've been living with the guilt for 15 years, knowing that sailors were serving on ships with defective components, because I didn't have the courage to speak up. When I saw the news today, saw what you did, I realized I couldn't stay silent anymore. Are you willing to testify? Yes, to everything. The design flaws, the pressure from Patterson to hide them, the orders from Morrison and Walsh to falsify test results. I kept copies of everything: test data, emails, internal memos. I can prove they knew the valves were defective before they installed them fleet-wide. Elena closed her eyes, gratitude flooding through her. Dr. Chen, you just gave us the final piece we need to prove criminal intent. With your testimony, we can show they knowingly put sailors at risk. I know, and I'm ready to face whatever consequences come from that. I need you to know that there are others like me. engineers who knew something was wrong but were too afraid to speak up. Maybe now, seeing that it's safe to come forward, they will. I hope so. After they hung up, Elena turned to Burke. We've won the battle, Commander, but the war's just starting. Walsh and Morrison are going to lawyer up, drag this out for years. There are going to be investigations, hearings, trials. It's going to get ugly. I know, but this time we're not fighting alone. This time the truth is on our side and the world knows it. They caught a train back to Washington. Elena spent the journey going through the news coverage on her phone. The stories were everywhere, trending on social media, discussed on cable news. Politicians were already calling for congressional hearings. The Secretary of the Navy had issued a statement promising full accountability. But what struck Elena most were the comments from active duty sailors. Hundreds of them posting anonymously, sharing their own stories of being pressured to ignore problems, to sign off on faulty equipment, to prioritize politics over safety. The dam had broken. People were talking. One comment in particular caught her eye, from someone identifying themselves as an engineering officer on one of the carriers with Nightingale installations. Captain Vasquez saved my ship and didn't even know it. We've been having weird power fluctuations for months that no one could explain. After reading about the valve defect, I checked our systems. We have the same flaw. We're getting it fixed now before it fails catastrophically. She might have saved hundreds of lives by refusing to stay quiet. That's a hero. Elena showed it to Burke. That's why we did this, not for glory or vindication. For that officer and his shipmates. And for Chen, Burke added. And for Chen. They arrived in Washington late that evening. A Navy staff car was waiting to take them to a secure facility where they'd be debriefed ahead of tomorrow's CNO meeting. But first, Elena asked the driver to make a stop. Arlington National Cemetery was closed for the night, but Elena's credentials still carried weight. She and Burke were allowed in, escorted by a security guard who walked a discreet distance behind them. Elena found Chen's grave easily. She'd visited it only once before, 15 years ago, standing in the rain during his funeral, too numb to cry. The headstone was simple, his name, rank, dates of service. It said nothing about his courage, his sacrifice, his unwillingness to accept convenient lies. She knelt and placed her hand on the cold marble. We did it, Chief, she said quietly. Morrison's finished. Walsh is going down. The whole rotten structure is coming apart. And the Navy, your Navy, is going to be better because you refused to stay quiet. Burke stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder. I never met him, Burke said. But I wish I had. He must have been an incredible man. He was. He taught me that competence without courage is useless, and courage without competence is reckless. You need both. He had both. Elena stood, wiping her eyes. I spent 15 years thinking I'd failed him, that I'd let his death be for nothing. But he knew. He knew I'd come back, that I'd finish what he started. He had more faith in me than I had in myself. You didn't fail him, Elena. You honored him. And tomorrow, when we testify, when we tell his story to the people who run the Navy, we're going to make sure everyone knows what he did. They stood there for another few minutes in the quiet darkness, surrounded by rows of white headstones marking the graves of warriors who'd given everything for their country. Chen was one among thousands, but his sacrifice was no less important. He'd died fighting an enemy within and in death. He'd given Elena the weapons she needed to finish that fight. As they walked back to the car, Elena felt something shift inside her. For 15 years, she'd carried guilt, anger, and fear. She'd let Morrison and Walsh make her believe she was the problem, that speaking truth to power was somehow wrong. But standing at Chen's grave, knowing that his evidence had finally brought justice, she felt that weight lift. She wasn't a troublemaker or a disgraced officer. She was an engineer who'd refused to let good people die for bad reasons. She was a whistleblower who'd risked everything for truth. She was exactly who Chen had believed she was. And tomorrow she was going to make sure the world knew it. The staff car took them to a secure Navy facility, where they were debriefed by a team of lawyers and investigators until well past midnight. They went through every detail, every piece of evidence, every moment of their journey from the Constellation to Arlington. The lawyers assured them that the case against Morrison and Walsh was solid, that there would be justice. But Elena had learned long ago that justice in institutions was a complicated thing. It was slow, often incomplete, and always political. Still, it was better than silence. Finally exhausted beyond measure, Elena was shown to temporary quarters, a small room with a bed, a desk, and a window overlooking the Potomac. She lay down fully clothed, too tired to even remove her shoes. Her last thought before sleep claimed her was of the young engineering officer who'd posted that comment online, the one who'd found the defect in his ship's systems before it could fail. She'd never meet him, never know his name, but she'd saved his life and the lives of his shipmates. That was enough. That was everything. Tomorrow she'd face the CNO and tell them all how the Navy had failed its sailors. Tomorrow she'd demand accountability and change. Tomorrow she'd begin the long process of rebuilding her life and her reputation. But tonight, for the first time in 15 years, Elena Vasquez slept without nightmares. Part 5. A New Dawn. Elena woke to someone knocking urgently on her door. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back. Washington. The debriefing. Chen's grave. Tomorrow was today. Captain Vasquez, Admiral Thorne needs to see you immediately. She checked her watch. 0530. The CNO meeting wasn't until 9. Something had happened. She found Thorne in a secure conference room surrounded by laptops and stacks of documents. His face was haggard, like he hadn't slept at all. "Tell me the good news first," Elena said. "There is no good news. Walsh disappeared 6 hours ago." Elena felt her stomach drop. Disappeared how? He was supposed to report to NCIS headquarters in Quantico for questioning. He never showed. His house is empty. His car's gone. His phone's off. Elena, he ran. He knows we have him. He knows the tape destroys any defense he could make, so he's running. It's worse than that. Thorne pulled up a file on one of the laptops. 2 hours ago, there was a fire at the Patterson Defense Systems headquarters in Arlington. Their entire server farm was destroyed. Every digital record they had gone. Elena's hands clenched into fists. He's destroying evidence. Everything we found. Everything Chen documented. He's trying to make it inadmissible by destroying the corroborating records. The FBI has the originals Chen left, and Dr. Sarah Chen still has her copies. But Walsh knows that trials take years and evidence can be challenged. He's buying himself time and options. Where would he go? He's a 3-star Admiral Marcus. He can't just disappear. He can if he has help, and he does. We've been going through Patterson's financial records, the ones that survived the fire. They've paid out over $50 million to various shell companies and offshore accounts over the last decade. Some of those payments correlate with assignments of specific Navy personnel to oversight positions. Walsh isn't alone in this. He's part of a network. Elena sat down heavily. How deep does it go? We don't know yet. But, Elena, if Walsh had help planning his escape, if he had people in the Navy or the government warning him, then this conspiracy is bigger than we thought. Burke entered the room looking as exhausted as Thorne. "I just got word from the Constellation. Captain Reeves received orders this morning to report to Washington immediately and relinquish command. The orders came from the office of the Secretary of the Navy. They're trying to isolate anyone who helped us," Elena said. "That's not all." Burke's voice was tight. 3 other engineering officers, all on ships with Nightingale installations, have been reassigned to administrative duties pending investigation. They're being accused of failing to maintain their equipment properly. "They're flipping the narrative," Elena said, anger rising in her voice. "They're making it look like the problem was negligent officers, not defective equipment. They're going to sacrifice junior officers to protect the institution." Thorne shook his head. "Not if we can help it. The CNO meeting is still on. We present everything we have and we force them to face the truth. Marcus, if Walsh ran, if evidence is being destroyed, if officers are being scapegoated, the Navy doesn't want the truth. They want damage control. Then we make them choose, public truth or private lies. But this time with the media already covering the story, with Dr. Chen coming forward with Santos's testimony, they can't hide anymore. 2 hours later, Elena walked into the Pentagon for the first time in 15 years. The building hadn't changed, still the same endless corridors, the same sense of institutional permanence. But Elena had changed. She wasn't the defeated captain who'd been forced into retirement. She was the woman who'd brought down a conspiracy that had killed her friend. The CNO's conference room was packed. Admiral Thorne sat beside her. Commander Burke was on her other side. Across the table sat the Chief of Naval Operations, a 4-star admiral named Mitchell, who'd served in submarines his entire career. Next to him was the Secretary of the Navy, a political appointee who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. There were lawyers, NCIS investigators, Inspector General representatives, and several other admirals Elena didn't recognize. "Captain Vasquez," Admiral Mitchell began, "thank you for coming. We've reviewed the evidence you've provided. The tape recording Chief Chen made the financial documents Dr. Chen's testimony. It's damning material." "It should be, sir. It documents 15 years of criminal conspiracy that cost lives and put thousands of sailors at risk." Mitchell nodded slowly. "I won't insult your intelligence by trying to minimize what happened. Vice Admiral Morrison has been placed under arrest. Captain Walsh is wanted by federal authorities. We're conducting a fleet-wide inspection of all vessels with Nightingale installations, and we're implementing immediate procedures to replace the defective components." "That's a good start," Elena said, "but it's not enough." The Secretary of the Navy leaned forward. "Captain, we're offering you full reinstatement at your former rank with back pay. We're prepared to issue a formal apology for your wrongful dismissal. We'll also be establishing a whistleblower protection program in Chief Chen's name. What more do you want?" "I want accountability. Real accountability. I want everyone who knew about the defect and chose to hide it prosecuted. I want the officers being scapegoated right now, the engineering officers on those ships cleared, and their records corrected. I want a full congressional investigation into Patterson Defense Systems and every other contractor involved. And I want the Navy to admit publicly what happened, not hide behind classified briefings and quiet settlements." "That's not possible," the Secretary said. "There are national security implications." "National security?" Elena's voice rose. "Don't talk to me about national security. You know what threatens national security? Sailors who can't trust their equipment. Allies who can't trust American military power. Enemies who see our corruption and know we're weak. The only thing that threatens national security more than exposing this scandal is continuing to hide it." Admiral Mitchell held up a hand. "Captain Vasquez, I understand your anger, but you need to understand the position we're in. If we publicly admit that for 15 years we knowingly operated ships with defective components, that we allowed contractors to bribe senior officers, that we covered up a murder, the damage to Navy credibility would be catastrophic. The damage is already done, Admiral. The story is already public. The question now is whether the Navy takes responsibility and fixes the problem, or whether you try to contain it and prove every cynic right about institutional corruption." The room was silent. Elena could see the admirals exchanging glances, the lawyers whispering urgently to each other. Then one of the admirals Elena didn't recognize spoke up. "Admiral Mitchell, if I may. I'm Vice Admiral Carson, Pacific Fleet Deputy Commander for Operations. I've served 32 years in this Navy, and in that time I've seen us face every kind of challenge. Combat budget cuts, political pressure. But I've never seen us face a crisis of integrity like this. Captain Vasquez is right. We can't contain this. We can only own it and fix it." Another admiral nodded. "I agree. Half my staff this morning was asking me if their ships were safe, if their equipment was reliable. These are senior officers, people who've dedicated their lives to the service, and they're questioning everything. If we don't get ahead of this, we lose the fleet's confidence." Mitchell looked around the table, then back at Elena. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Full transparency," Elena said. "The CNO holds a press conference, admits what happened, announces the corrective actions. You charge everyone involved with crimes. You protect the whistleblowers and the officers who stood up. You make it clear that this was a failure of leadership, not a failure of the institution. And you implement reforms that make sure this never happens again." That's a tall order. "So was exposing the conspiracy in the first place. We did that. You can do this." The Secretary of the Navy shook his head. Captain, even if we wanted to do what you're suggesting, it would take months to coordinate. The legal implications alone— You don't have months, Burke interrupted. Sir, with respect, every day you delay is another day that sailors are serving on ships they can't fully trust. Another day that enemies are watching our chaos and planning. Another day that the American people are wondering if their Navy is competent. You need to act now. Admiral Thorne added his voice. Admiral Mitchell, I've known you for 20 years. You're a good man, a good officer. But this is your legacy moment. How you handle this will define not just your tenure as CNO, but the Navy's reputation for a generation. Do the right thing. Mitchell sat back in his chair, and Elena could see him wrestling with the decision. He was a career officer, someone who'd risen through the ranks by being smart, political, and careful. What Elena was asking would end his career. She knew that. No CNO could admit to a scandal this massive and survive politically, but maybe that was the point. Maybe the institution needed leaders willing to sacrifice their careers for integrity. Give me 24 hours, Mitchell finally said. I need to brief the President, coordinate with the Justice Department, and prepare the fleet. But Captain Vasquez, if we do this, if we go public with everything you need to be prepared for the fallout, there will be congressional hearings, lawsuits, media scrutiny. Your life will not be your own for the next year. I've been living with this for 15 years, Admiral. One more year won't kill me. All right, 24 hours. In the meantime, you're all to remain in the Washington area and available for additional briefings. Dismissed. As they filed out, the Secretary of the Navy caught Elena's arm. Captain, off the record, why you got your vindication. Morrison's finished. Walsh is on the run. You could have taken your settlement and walked away. Why push for more? Elena thought about Chen, about his letter about the young sailors serving on compromised ships. Because settling would mean accepting that the system worked the way it's supposed to. And it didn't. The system protected the guilty and punished the honest. If we don't fix that, then Chen died for nothing, and I'm not letting that happen. The next 24 hours were a blur of activity. Elena was interviewed by NCIS, by Navy lawyers, by congressional staffers. The media was relentless reporters camped outside the facility trying to get statements. Her phone rang constantly with requests for interviews. Dr. Sarah Chen arrived in Washington and gave her formal statement to federal investigators. She was joined by 2 other engineers who'd worked on Nightingale and had been pressured to stay quiet. Their testimony was devastating, describing in technical detail how they'd been ordered to falsify test results and hide data showing the defects. Santos, the petty officer who'd witnessed Chen's murder, was brought from protective custody to give a videotaped deposition. Elena watched it and had to leave the room halfway through, overcome with emotion, as Santos described in heartbreaking detail how Chen had died, how the young sailor had been too terrified to speak up, how he'd carried the guilt for 15 years. Burke spent hours on the phone with his wife, explaining over and over why he'd done what he did. Elena could hear the strain in his voice, but also the conviction. His wife told him she understood that their daughter needed to see her father stand for something. And throughout it all, Elena kept thinking about Walsh. Where had he gone? Who was helping him? And what damage could he still do? She got her answer at 3 a.m. when Thorne pounded on her door again. Walsh surfaced. He's in Singapore beyond extradition. How did he get out of the country? The FBI had alerts at every airport, every border crossing. He had help. We're still piecing it together, but it looks like he flew out on a private jet from a small airfield in Maryland. The flight plan was filed under a corporate charter. Elena, the jet, is owned by a subsidiary of Patterson Defense Systems. They helped him escape. That's what it looks like. But here's the thing, he didn't go quietly. 20 minutes ago, he posted a video to social media. He's claiming he's being persecuted for political reasons, that the Nightingale scandal is a witch hunt designed to damage the Navy's relationship with defense contractors. He's portraying himself as a victim. Elena felt rage building. He's trying to muddy the waters, make this about politics instead of safety. It's worse. He's released classified documents, or what he claims are classified documents, showing that you made unauthorized modifications to multiple ships during your service. He's saying you're the one who created the problems you're now claiming to expose. That's insane. Those modifications were authorized, documented. I know. But Elena, he's weaponizing doubt. He's creating an alternative narrative where you're the villain and he's the whistleblower. Some people are already buying it. There are social media posts defending him, attacking you. Elena sat down, feeling the weight of it all pressing down on her. We have evidence. We have the tape, the financial records, the witness testimony. How can people believe his lies over documented proof? Because people believe what they want to believe. And some people want to believe that the system isn't corrupt, that their leaders aren't criminals. Walsh is giving them permission to keep believing that. So what do? We stick to the truth. The evidence doesn't change because Walsh is a good liar. The CNO's press conference is in 6 hours. We let the facts speak for themselves. But when Admiral Mitchell finally stood before the cameras at 9 o'clock that morning, Elena realized that facts alone wouldn't be enough. The room was packed with reporters, their questions hostile and skeptical. Admiral Captain Walsh claims that Captain Vasquez is a disgraced officer seeking revenge. How do you respond? Mitchell's jaw tightened. Captain Walsh is a fugitive from justice who fled the country to avoid prosecution. Captain Vasquez is a decorated officer who exposed a criminal conspiracy at great personal cost. The evidence supports her account completely. But Sir Walsh has released documents showing unauthorized modifications. Those documents are fabrications. Captain Vasquez's service record has been reviewed by the Inspector General and found to be exemplary. Every modification she made was properly authorized and documented. Then why was she forced into early retirement 15 years ago? This was the moment. Elena watched Mitchell take a deep breath and she knew he was about to end his career. Because senior officers, including Vice Admiral Morrison and Captain Walsh, conspired to silence her when she reported a critical safety flaw in fleet propulsion systems. They fabricated charges against her, forced her into retirement, and classified evidence of their wrongdoing. In short, they committed crimes to protect a corrupt relationship with defense contractors. I am here today to admit that the United States Navy failed. Captain Vasquez failed Chief Petty Officer Chen and failed every sailor serving on ships with defective equipment. We allowed institutional politics to override safety and integrity. That ends today. The room erupted with questions, but Mitchell held up his hand. I'm announcing my resignation as Chief of Naval Operations effective immediately. I'm also announcing a complete overhaul of how the Navy handles whistleblower complaints and contractor oversight. Captain Elena Vasquez will be reinstated with full honors and appointed as a special advisor to the next CNO to oversee these reforms. The Justice Department is pursuing criminal charges against everyone involved in the conspiracy, and we will cooperate fully with their investigation. The American people deserve better than what happened here. Our sailors deserve better, and I personally apologize to Captain Vasquez for the injustice she suffered. Elena felt tears streaming down her face. Mitchell hadn't just admitted the truth, he'd fallen on his sword to prove the Navy was serious about accountability. After the press conference, Mitchell found her in a quiet corridor. That wasn't necessary, Elena said. You didn't have to resign. Yes, I did. The Navy needs a clean break, a fresh start. Someone has to take responsibility at the highest level, and that's me. Besides, I'm 62. I've had my career, but you still have work to do. He extended his hand. Thank you, Captain Vasquez, for not giving up, for believing the Navy could be better than it was. Elena shook his hand, too emotional to speak. Over the next weeks, the dominoes continued to fall. Morrison was formally charged with conspiracy, fraud, and obstruction of justice. 17 other officers and officials were charged with related crimes. Patterson Defense Systems was barred from federal contracts pending investigation, and their CEO was arrested, trying to board a plane to Dubai. Dr. Sarah Chen became the star witness in the case, her technical testimony demolishing any defense the conspirators might have mounted. She described in devastating detail how Patterson executives had knowingly supplied defective components and bribed Navy officials to hide the defects. The media coverage was relentless, but gradually shifted from scandal to reform. Stories emerged about other whistleblowers in other branches of the military who'd been silenced. Congress passed new protections. The Pentagon announced sweeping changes to acquisition oversight. Burke was promoted to captain and given command of his own ship. His daughter sent Elena a letter thanking her for teaching her father what courage looked like. Captain Reeves was cleared of any wrongdoing and returned to command of the Constellation with a commendation for his integrity. Santos, the petty officer who'd witnessed Chen's death, was awarded the Navy and Marine Corps Medal for his eventual bravery in coming forward. He told reporters he'd done it for Chen to give his friend the justice he deserved. And Elena found herself back in uniform standing before packed auditoriums at the Naval Academy and War College, teaching the next generation of officers about ethics, integrity, and the courage to speak truth to power. 6 months after the CNO's press conference, Elena received word that Walsh had been arrested in Singapore after all. An extradition treaty most people didn't know existed had been invoked, and he was being flown back to the United States in custody. She was there when he arrived, watching from a distance as federal marshals led him off the plane in handcuffs. He looked older, diminished, nothing like the powerful Admiral who'd tried to destroy her. Their eyes met for just a moment. Elena expected to feel anger, satisfaction, triumph. Instead, she felt only sadness. Walsh had thrown away an honorable career for money and ego. He'd destroyed lives and compromised national security to protect himself. And in the end, he'd lost everything anyway. The trial lasted 8 weeks. Elena testified for 3 days, walking the jury through the technical evidence, the cover-up, the conspiracy. Walsh's lawyers tried to discredit her, but the evidence was overwhelming. Chen's tape alone destroyed any defense. The verdict was guilty on all counts. At sentencing, Walsh was given 25 years in federal prison. Morrison received 20. 15 other defendants received sentences ranging from probation to 15 years. Patterson Defense Systems was fined $800 million and dissolved. Elena attended the sentencing but didn't speak. She didn't need to. The evidence had spoken for her. Afterward, outside the courthouse, a reporter asked her how she felt. "I feel like justice was finally served. But justice doesn't bring Chen back. It doesn't give me back the 15 years I lost. It doesn't undo the damage. It just ensures that the people responsible are held accountable. That's not victory. It's just the end of a very long fight." "What's next for you, Captain?" Elena smiled. "I'm going back to work. There are 19 other ships still undergoing repairs. There are hundreds of junior officers who need to learn that integrity matters more than politics. There's a Navy that needs to be reminded why it exists, not to serve contractors or politicians, but to protect this country and the people in it. So that's what I'm going to do." 1 year after Walsh's arrest, Elena stood on the deck of the USS Constellation as it underwent sea trials following its complete propulsion system overhaul. Commander Burke, now Captain Burke, stood beside her. "Your repair held perfectly," he said. 18 months under full power, not a single problem. You literally rewrote the manual, Elena." "We rewrote it. Yumi Torres Kim, all those sailors who believed in doing it right." The ship's engines thrummed beneath their feet, smooth and powerful. Elena put her hand on the bulkhead, feeling the vibration. "Chen would have loved this," she said quietly. "A ship running on properly engineered systems commanded by officers who put integrity first. He'd be proud of you. He'd be proud of all of us. He gave us the tools. We just had to find the courage to use them." That evening, Elena returned to Arlington National Cemetery. She knelt at Chen's grave and placed a framed photograph beside the headstone. It showed the Constellation at sea, running at full power, the American flag streaming from its mast. "We did it, Chief," she said. "Every ship in the fleet is safe now. Every sailor can trust their equipment. Walsh is in prison. Morrison's finished, Patterson's gone. The system worked finally, because you refused to let it fail." She sat there for a long time, remembering her friend, remembering all the battles they'd fought together, remembering his laugh and his terrible jokes and his absolute unwillingness to accept anything less than excellence. Finally, as the sun set over the rows of white headstones, Elena stood. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. For leaving me the tools I needed to finish the fight. For being the kind of friend who dies for what's right. I hope wherever you are, you know it mattered. You mattered." She walked back to her car where Admiral Thorne was waiting. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready." They drove to the Naval Academy, where Elena was giving the graduation address to the newest class of ensigns. Thorne had asked her what she planned to say. "The truth," she'd told him. "Just the truth." Standing before 2,000 young officers about to begin their careers, Elena looked out at their eager faces and thought about the Navy they would inherit. It was better than the one she'd left 15 years ago. Not perfect, but better. More honest, more accountable, more willing to listen to the uncomfortable truths that kept it strong. "Ensigns," she began. "In a few minutes you'll take your oath and become officers in the United States Navy. You'll be given responsibility for ships, for systems, for sailors. And at some point in your career, you're going to be faced with a choice. You'll discover something wrong, a safety issue, a fraudulent practice, an illegal order, and you'll have to decide whether to speak up or stay quiet." She paused, letting the words sink in. Staying quiet is easier. No one gets mad at you. You don't risk your career. You get promoted on schedule. But staying quiet makes you complicit. It makes you part of the problem. And eventually people get hurt because you didn't have the courage to do what you knew was right. Elena thought of Chen, of Morrison, of Walsh, of all the officers who'd faced that choice and made different decisions. 15 years ago, my friend Chief Petty Officer Chen discovered a critical safety flaw that put thousands of sailors at risk. He reported it despite pressure to stay quiet. He documented everything despite orders to stop. He refused to let politics override safety, and he was murdered for it. The audience stirred, shocked by the bluntness. But Chief Chen prepared for that possibility. He left evidence hidden in 3 places, evidence that eventually exposed the biggest corruption scandal in modern Navy history. He knew speaking truth to power might cost him everything. He did it anyway. Because he understood something fundamental: the oath you're about to take isn't to your commanding officer or your career. It's to the Constitution, to the nation, and to the sailors who trust you to lead them. Elena's voice grew stronger, more forceful. "Some of you will rise to Admiral. Some will command fleets. And when you do, you'll face pressure to prioritize politics over safety, money over integrity, convenience over truth. In those moments, remember, Chief Chen, remember that courage isn't charging into battle. Sometimes courage is standing in an office and saying, 'No, this is wrong and I won't be part of it.'" She looked out at the sea of young faces. "The Navy you're joining today is better because people like Chen refuse to stay silent. The reforms you'll benefit from exist because whistleblowers risked everything to expose corruption. You have an obligation to continue that tradition, to be the kind of officer who speaks up when something's wrong, to be the kind of leader who listens when your subordinates bring you bad news, to be the kind of person who values integrity more than advancement." Elena's voice softened. "It won't be easy. You'll face resistance, hostility, maybe even threats to your career. But you'll be able to look at yourself in the mirror. You'll be able to sleep at night. And when your career is over, when you're looking back on your service, you'll know you did the right thing even when it was hard. That's what it means to serve with honor." She stepped back from the podium. "Congratulations, ensigns. Welcome to the United States Navy. We need you. And we need you to be better than we were. Now go make us proud." The applause was thunderous, a standing ovation that went on for minutes, but Elena barely heard it. She was thinking of Chen, wondering if somehow, somewhere he knew that his sacrifice hadn't been in vain. After the ceremony, a young ensign approached her. She was maybe 22, fresh-faced and idealistic, her new uniform still crisp. "Captain Vasquez, I just wanted to say thank you. Your story, Chief Chen's story, it's why I joined. I want to be the kind of officer who stands up for what's right." Elena smiled and shook her hand. "Then you're already on the right path. Stay true to that. The Navy needs more officers like you." As the ensign walked away, Thorne appeared beside Elena. "Hell of a speech," he said. "Think they'll listen?" "Some will, maybe most, and that's enough. Elena, you've changed the Navy's culture more in 1 year than most people do in entire careers. You should be proud." "I'll be proud when every sailor can trust their equipment and their leaders. We're getting there, but we're not there yet." Thorne smiled. "You know what Chen would say right now?" "What?" Good work, El. Now get back to it. We've got ships to fix. Elena laughed, feeling tears spring to her eyes. Yeah, that sounds like him. They walked together across the academy grounds, past the monuments to naval heroes, past the chapel where generations of officers had been married, past the cemetery where those who'd given everything were honored. Elena thought about her journey from decorated officer to disgraced whistleblower to vindicated hero. She thought about the cost, the years of silence, the nights wondering if speaking up had been worth it. And she thought about the young engineering officer who'd found the defect in his ship's systems because Elena had refused to stay quiet. She thought about the thousands of sailors serving on safe, properly maintained ships. She thought about the reforms that would protect future whistleblowers. It had been worth it. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt, it had all been worth it. Because in the end, the truth had won. Not quickly, not easily, but completely. Chen's death had meant something. Elena's fight had meant something. And the Navy, their Navy was better because they'd refused to accept corruption as the price of service. That evening, back in her office at the Pentagon, Elena received an email. It was from Santos, the petty officer, who'd witnessed Chen's death. Captain Vasquez, I wanted you to know I'm staying in. I was thinking about getting out after my testimony felt like I couldn't trust the system anymore. But watching you fight, watching Admiral Mitchell resign, watching justice actually happen, it restored my faith. Chief Chen died believing the Navy could be better. You proved he was right. I'm going to retire as a Master Chief someday, and when I do, I'm going to tell every sailor I meet about what you and Chen did, how you refused to give up, how you made the system work. Thank you for that. Thank you for everything. Elena read the message 3 times, then saved it in a special folder labeled, Why We Fight. She looked at the photograph on her desk, the one of her and Chen taken 20 years ago on the deck of their first ship together, both of them young and idealistic and convinced they could change the world. They had changed the world. Maybe not the whole world, but their corner of it. And sometimes Elena thought that's enough. Sometimes one person's courage, one friend's sacrifice, one whistleblower's determination to speak truth to power. Sometimes that's all it takes to move mountains. Chen had started the fight. Elena had finished it. And now standing in her Pentagon office with the weight of a Navy that was finally honest pressing down on her shoulders, Elena Vasquez understood what her friend had known all along. The fight for integrity never ends, but every battle won makes the next one easier. Every truth spoken makes silence a little harder. Every person who stands up makes it safer for the next one to do the same. That was Chen's legacy. That was Elena's victory. And that was the lesson she would spend the rest of her career teaching, that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the refusal to let fear silence you. That integrity isn't convenient, but it's essential. That sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing. And that when an admiral whispers your name when the Navy that destroyed you comes begging for your help, you show up, not because you've forgiven them, not because you've forgotten, but because the sailors counting on you deserve better than the lies that almost killed them. Elena turned off her office lights and headed home, ready to do it all again tomorrow. Because the work of building a better Navy, a more honest institution, a system that valued truth over convenience, that work was never done. But thanks to Chen, thanks to Santos, thanks to every whistleblower who'd ever risked everything for what was right, that work was finally possible. And Elena Vasquez would spend every day she had left making sure that possibility became reality. One ship at a time, one truth at a time, one courageous choice at a time. Until the day came when no admiral would ever need to whisper her name, because the Navy had learned to listen to the truth the first time it was spoken.